Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto defeated Kaido, became the king of beasts, and fell in love with Yamato. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Fall of the Dragon, The Rise of the Fox. The world was screaming. It wasn't the cries of the samurai fighting for their lives on the island floating above, nor the terrified shrieks from the citizens of the flower capital far below. It wasn't even the drunken, bellowing roar of the creature that called itself a god. It was the world itself, the air, the sky, the very fabric of existence, shrieking under the strain of a power it was never meant to contain. Naruto Uzumaki felt it in his bones, a dissonant hum that vibrated up from his sandals to the base of his skull. He stood on a chunk of floating rock, a piece of the skull-shaped fortress of Onigashima that had been sheared off in the chaos. His orange and black jacket was torn, the sleeves ripped away completely, but the golden energy cloaking his body sealed his wounds and burned away the blood before it could even fall. Below him, the capital was a kaleidoscope of color and light, a festival meant to be a celebration, now a backdrop for Armageddon. Across from him, Kaido loomed. He was no longer the man-beast hybrid he'd been for most of the fight. He was a true dragon, an azure serpent of impossible size, coils thick as ancient trees wrapping around the floating island's massive horn. Scales like polished lapis lazuli shimmered, each one the size of a shield. His eyes were molten gold, burning with a rage so pure it had become a force of nature. Smoke, thick and acrid, billowed from his nostrils with every guttural breath. "You have spirit, boy," Kaido's voice boomed, a sound that was less speech and more a geological event. It cracked the very air. "I'll grant you that. More than any of those pathetic scabbards. More than that rubbery fool. You have the feel of him, that damned will that refuses to be broken." Naruto didn't respond. Words were a waste of oxygen. He'd been in this strange, waterlogged world for weeks, pulled through a tear in reality during the final clash with Kaguya. He'd landed in the sea, been fished out by bewildered fishermen, and learned of this land of Wano, a nation suffocating under the boot of a tyrant. He'd seen the poisoned rivers, the starving children in the leftovers towns, the hollow eyes of people who had forgotten what hope felt like. It was a pain he knew all too well. So he'd come here, to the heart of the storm. He hadn't come to talk. He brought his hands together, the golden chakra around him flaring. Sage art, massive Rasengan. In his palm, a sphere of swirling energy grew, dwarfing him, then dwarfing the rocky platform he stood on. It wasn't the silent, compressed power of his normal Rasengan. This was a raw, untamed thing, infused with the energy of the world itself. It roared like a captured hurricane. With a surge of strength, he leaped, rocketing toward the dragon's immense face. Kaido sneered, a terrifying sight on a reptilian maw. A simple trick. He didn't move to dodge. He simply opened his mouth, and from the depths of his throat, a torrent of raw, superheated energy erupted. Burrow breath. The beam of destruction, wide enough to incinerate a town, met Naruto's sphere of rotation. The impact was silent for a single, terrifying heartbeat. There was no sound, only a flash of white light that bleached all color from the world. Then, the sound came, a deafening, world-breaking crack boom that shattered every window in the capital below and sent a shockwave plowing through the clouds. On the ground, Yamato, panting and bruised, her white hair stained with grime, looked up. The horns on her head felt like they were vibrating. She saw the two attacks collide, a son being born and dying in the same instant. The sheer force knocked her and the surrounding samurai off their feet. What is that power?" Kinemon gasped, using his sword to push himself up. Yamato had no answer. She had felt her father's haki her entire life. It was a suffocating, oppressive force, the weight of a mountain pressing down on your soul, demanding you submit. But this man, this Naruto, his power was different. It was just as immense, just as overwhelming, but it felt like the sun. It didn't crush you, it blinded you, burned you, but at its core, there was a feeling not of dominion, but of life. A raging, defiant, untamable life. The explosion in the sky ripped a hole in the night. For a moment, the real sun was visible through the clouds. When the light faded, Naruto was hurtling back toward Onigashima, his golden cloak flickering. Kaido was still there, a long, scorched burn mark across his snout, but he was laughing. A deep, rumbling laugh that shook the heavens. Worororo. Good. That's the first time in years I've felt a sting. He shifted, his massive body coiling tighter. But a sting is all it is. In this world, power is absolute. Your ideals, your hope, they are illusions. Only the strong survive, boy. Only they have the right to do as they please. Naruto landed hard on the main platform of the island, skidding to a halt near the terrified, wide-eyed ranks of the beast pirates. They scrambled away from him as if he were made of acid. He ignored them. He looked at Kaido, his blue eyes hard as diamonds. You call this strength? Naruto's voice was quiet, yet it cut through the wind. Hiding on an island, terrorizing people who can't fight back. Starving children to feed your army? That's not strength. It's the most pathetic form of cowardice I've ever seen. The laughter stopped. The golden eyes of the dragon narrowed into furious slits. You dare, lecture me? I am Kaido. I am the strongest creature in the world. I have been captured, tortured, and executed 40 times. I have jumped from a sky island and felt nothing. I am invincible. Your words are the buzzing of an insect. He lunged. It wasn't a blast of energy this time, it was his physical body. A coil of his tail, thicker than any ship, whipped through the air with the speed of a cannonball, aimed at turning Naruto into a red smear on the floor. Naruto didn't move. He simply held up a hand. The impact was cataclysmic. The floor of Onigashima for 100 meters around him buckled and cracked. But Naruto stood his ground, one hand pressed against the wall of blue scales, the tail stopped dead in its tracks. The golden chakra around his hand flared, pushing back against the impossible kinetic force. From the ranks of the beast pirates, a gasp. King the conflagration, his dark wings flared, his masked face unreadable, took an involuntary step back. Queen, the massive cyborg, dropped the cigar from his mouth. They had seen their captain-level castles with a flick of his tail. They had never, ever seen it stopped. You talk a lot about strength, Naruto said, his voice still level, though his muscles screamed in protest. But you don't seem to understand what it is. He pushed. Not with his body, but with his chakra. A concussive blast of pure, golden energy erupted from his palm. Kaido's tail, all several thousand tons of it, was thrown back. The dragon roared in frustration and pain, his colossal body recoiling. You want to see real strength? Naruto called out, his body flaring brighter, the golden cloak solidifying. Black markings materialized on his face, across his collarbones. The pupils of his eyes became cross-shaped slits. I'll show you. He vanished. Not fast. Not a blur. One moment he was there, the next he was gone. Kaido's senses, honed by a century of battle and enhanced by observation haki, screamed a warning. He twisted his massive head just as Naruto reappeared above him, descending like a meteor. In his hand was another Rasengan, this one black as night, spinning with a malevolent hum. Tailed beast ball Rasengan. He slammed it into the back of Kaido's skull. The resulting explosion wasn't fiery, it was concussive. A sphere of pure, dark force expanded, enveloping Kaido's head. The dragon's roar was cut off, replaced by a choked, agonized bellow. His massive body spasmed, and he plummeted from the sky, crashing onto the main dome of his own fortress. The skull of Onigashima, which had withstood countless battles, cracked and splintered under the impact. The beast pirates stared in stunned silence. Their invincible lord, the strongest creature alive, had been knocked out of the sky. But he wasn't done. A wave of energy, thick and suffocating, rolled off the downed dragon. It was an angry, red-black aura that pulsed with fury. Conqueror's Haki. It washed over the island, not to intimidate, but to dominate. Weaker-willed pirates and samurai alike collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Naruto landed softly beside the crater Kaido had made. He felt the Haki wash over him. It felt like walking into a high-pressure zone, a strange and potent form of killing intent, but it had no purchase on his mind. He'd faced down the collective hatred of a world, stared into the eyes of a rabbit goddess who birthed chakra itself. This was just raw, unfiltered rage. From the crater, Kaido rose. He was no longer a full dragon. He was back in his hybrid form, humanoid but scaled, horned, and massive, his club, Hasaikai, held in one hand. His eyes were bloodshot, veins pulsing on his forehead. He was swaying, clearly drunk on his own fury. "Now you've done it," he slurred, pointing a clawed finger at Naruto. "Now I'm angry. No more games. No more testing you. I'm going to erase you. I'm going to wipe your existence from the very memory of this world." He raised his kanabo. Black and red lightning crackled around it, the telltale sign of Conqueror's Haki coating. Ragnarok. He brought the club down. The attack didn't just carry physical force, it carried the weight of his will, an attack meant to shatter not just the body, but the spirit. Naruto met it. He didn't form a jutsu. He didn't create a clone. He simply brought his hands up, crossed in a block, and took the full force of the blow. The island screamed. The ground beneath Naruto's feet disintegrated, and he was driven down through the floor of the dome, then through the level below, and the one below that. A plume of dust and debris erupted from the side of the floating island as he was smashed through its very structure. Yamato screamed his name, her voice raw. For a second, she thought he was gone. Then, a flicker of gold shone from the hole in the island. Naruto flew out, his arms trembling slightly, but otherwise unharmed. The golden cloak had held. He looked at Kaido, his expression finally shifting from grim determination to something harder. Something colder. "My turn," he said. He closed his eyes. The world seemed to hold its breath. The chaotic energy around him, the screaming wind, the crackling Haki, it all faded into a profound silence. He drew in a breath, and with it, the very essence of the world seemed to flow into him. Natural energy. Pure, untainted, and more powerful than any rage. When he opened his eyes, the cross slits were still there, but now they were encased in the vibrant orange pigmentation of a perfect sage. The golden cloak of Kurama's power swirled and grew, expanding behind him, forming 9 distinct tails of pure energy. It solidified, growing larger and larger, until a colossal avatar of golden chakra towered over Onigashima. It was a fox, a magnificent, terrible creature of light, with Naruto at its core, suspended in its forehead like a diamond. The Kurama avatar. The pinnacle of his power. The beast pirates didn't even have the capacity for fear anymore. They were simply staring at a god. King's wings stiffened, the fire on his back burning hotter in agitation. Queen's cybernetic jaw hung open. Even the samurai, Naruto's allies, looked on with a mixture of hope and primal terror. Yamato felt a tear trace a path through the grime on her cheek. She wasn't looking at a monster. She was looking at the dawn. Odin had written about a figure who would bring the dawn to Wano in 20 years. She was looking at it, a brilliant, golden sun made manifest. "What, are you?" Kaido whispered, his drunken stupor evaporating in the face of this holy spectacle. The avatar's voice was Naruto's, but it was amplified 1,000 times, echoing across the sky. "I am Naruto Uzumaki." One of the avatar's massive chakra hands rose, and in its palm, a new energy began to form. It wasn't a sphere. It was a disk, a star of spinning wind so fast and so sharp it shrieked like a million tortured birds. Black lightning, the power of the Sage of Six Paths, crackled around it. It grew, and grew, until it was a spinning shuriken of divine judgment the size of a warship. Sage Art, Tailed Beast Bomb Raisin Shuriken. Kaido met the challenge. He roared, his body bloating, muscles swelling with a final, desperate surge of power. His scales turned a dark, volcanic black, and flames erupted from his body, not normal flames, but a burning, clinging magma that seemed to eat the very air. This is my final form. This is the peak, he screamed, his voice distorting. Flaming Drum Dragon. He opened his mouth, but it wasn't a burrow breath that emerged. It was a dragon made of pure magma, a construct of his own life force and haki, roaring as it shot toward the golden fox. Draconic Damnation Flame. The two ultimate attacks crossed the small distance between them. The shrieking of the Raisin Shuriken met the roar of the magma dragon. For a moment, they were perfectly matched. The night sky was split in two, one half a blinding, golden vortex of wind and lightning, the other a swirling inferno of crimson and black. The pressure wave alone was enough to make the entire island of Onigashima groan, threatening to tear it apart. But Naruto's attack was more than just power. It was built on a different principle. It didn't just explode. It disintegrated. The countless microscopic wind blades of the Raisin Shuriken began to shear away at the magma dragon, slicing through the haki-infused flames. The magma construct wavered, its form shredding apart into sparks and embers. It's over, Kaido. Naruto's voice echoed. The Raisin Shuriken tore through the last of the magma dragon and slammed into Kaido's chest. There was no grand explosion. There was only light, and the sound of something being unmade. Kaido's eyes went wide, a look of genuine shock on his face for the first time. He didn't feel pain. He felt dissolution. The wind blades, each one a microscopic needle of sage-infused energy, were severing him on a cellular level, attacking the bonds of his very existence. His roar was not one of pain, but of disbelief. His body, the body that had been called invincible, began to flake away, turning into motes of dust that were sucked into the vortex of the Raisin Shuriken. The strongest creature in the world, the unbreakable tyrant, was being erased. His last sight was of the golden fox, and the determined, sad eyes of the boy at its center. Then, there was nothing. The Raisin Shuriken spun for a few moments more, a miniature star hanging in the sky, before it imploded, sucking the last remnants of Kaido into itself and vanishing with a soft pop. And then, silence. A profound, absolute silence that was more shocking than any explosion. The wind stopped. The crackling haki was gone. The oppressive weight that had crushed Wano for 20 years had vanished. The clouds, ripped apart by the battle, slowly began to drift back together, revealing the moon. The golden avatar of the fox shimmered, then dissolved into particles of light, fading away until only Naruto remained, floating in the air. The golden cloak receded, leaving him in his torn jacket. He was panting, sweat beading on his brow. He looked down at his hands, then at the empty space where a god dragon had just been. He had won. He drifted down, his feet touching the cracked and broken floor of Onigashima. He was exhausted, the kind of soul-deep weariness that came from burning through a sea of chakra. All around him, the beast pirates stood frozen. Hundreds of them. Men, women, giants, beings who looked more animal than human. Their weapons were slack in their hands. Their eyes were wide, staring at him. Their world had just been broken. The pillar of their reality, the unshakable tenet that Kaido was the strongest, had been pulverized. What replaced it was a new, terrifying reality. The small, blond man standing in the center of the devastation was stronger. Slowly, hesitantly, one of the pirates, a man with the head of a ram, dropped his club. It clattered on the stone. He fell to his knees. Then, he pressed his forehead to the ground. It was like a dam breaking. One by one, then in dozens, then in hundreds, the beast pirates fell to their knees. A wave of submission washed over the island. They bowed, their heads touching the floor, a silent, instinctual tribute to the new apex predator. They didn't worship ideals. They didn't worship kings. They worshipped strength. And they had just witnessed its ultimate expression. Naruto stared at them, confused. He'd expected them to flee, or to attack him in a final, suicidal charge. This was something else. This was reverence. A shadow fell over him. He looked up to see King the Conflagration land silently before him. The tall, gimp-masked Lunarian sheathed his blade. The fire on his back burned steadily. He looked at the bowing pirates, then at Naruto. His voice was a calm, deep baritone, devoid of the panic or shock that gripped the others. Kaido has fallen, King stated, a simple fact. He paused, his gaze assessing Naruto from head to toe. He saw the exhaustion, but he also saw the unyielding core of power that still radiated from him. He saw the new reality. The crew abides by one law, the strongest rules. He knelt. Not prostrating himself like the others, but a single, deliberate knee, the gesture of a knight swearing fealty to his monarch. All hail the new king of the beasts, King declared, his voice ringing out in the unnatural quiet. The words hit Naruto like a physical blow. King of the beasts? He looked around at the kneeling pirates, at the broken island, at the land he'd just freed. This wasn't what he wanted. He didn't want a crew of bloodthirsty killers. He didn't want to be a king. He wanted to go home. But before he could form a protest, his legs gave out. The adrenaline faded, and the true cost of the battle hit him. The world tilted, a black veil creeping in at the edges of his vision. He stumbled, catching himself just before he collapsed. He needed to rest. Just for a minute. He pushed himself away from the center of the dome, away from the kneeling pirates and their silent fealty. He found a broken archway overlooking the dark forests of Wano, the flower capital a distant glow. He sank to the ground, his back against the cool stone, and finally let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for weeks. He closed his eyes, the image of Kaido disintegrating burned into his mind. He hadn't wanted to kill him. He never wanted to kill anyone if he could help it. But the man had been a rabid dog, too far gone, a force of nature that had to be put down. Still, the finality of it left a bitter taste in his mouth. A soft crunch of rubble made him open his eyes. Yamato stood there. Her massive kanabo was resting on her shoulder. She was staring at him, her turquoise eyes wide with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. It was awe, yes, but there was something else. Something deeper. You did it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You brought the dawn. Naruto managed a weak, tired smile. Just cleaning up a mess. She took a hesitant step closer. My father, he was the strongest. Everyone knew it. No one could beat him. But you. She shook her head, as if trying to clear it. I knew you were strong when I saw you fight. But this is something else. It's like Odin wrote in his journal. A power that will shake the world. She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and wonder. You're just like him. You're the savior we've been waiting for. Naruto's smile faded. He looked at her, at the earnest hope on her face, the way she was projecting the image of her hero onto him. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of the people of his own village, after he'd defeated pain. The look that put him on a pedestal he never asked to stand on. He pushed himself up a little straighter, his voice gentle but firm, cutting through her awe. I'm not Odin. Yamato blinked, taken aback. What? I'm not him, Naruto repeated, meeting her gaze directly. He wanted her to understand. It was important, for some reason he couldn't yet articulate, that she understood. I read some of his story. He seemed like a great man. An incredible man. But I'm not him. I didn't do this for his prophecy, or to fulfill some destiny. I did it because I saw people suffering and I couldn't stand by and do nothing. He pointed a thumb at his own chest. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. That's all. The words hung in the air between them. Yamato stared at him, her mouth slightly open. She had spent her entire life trying to be Kazuki Oden, to embody his spirit. Everyone she admired, she saw through the lens of his legend. But this man, the one who had just achieved the impossible, was actively, calmly, rejecting the comparison. He wasn't a vessel for Oden's will. He was his own person. And in that moment, for the first time, Yamato saw him. Not as a savior. Not as a new Oden. But as Naruto Uzumaki. A tired, powerful, strangely gentle man with the saddest, most determined blue eyes she had ever seen. A flicker of something new, something that had nothing to do with journals or prophecies, sparked in her chest. It was curiosity. It was interest. Far away, hidden in the shadowed eaves of a pagoda in the capital, a figure in a white suit adjusted his horned mask. His two companions lay unconscious at his feet, knocked out by the wave of conqueror's haki that had washed over the land. But he was different. He was trained to withstand it. He was Guernica, of Cipher Pole Aegis 0. He lowered a small, specialized camera Den Mushi, its eye stalk retracting. He had witnessed everything. He had seen the Golden God, the screaming star of wind, and the disintegration of an emperor of the sea. His mind, trained for espionage and assassination, could not process what he had seen. It broke every known parameter of power in the world government's databases. Devil fruit. No sigil of a fruit awakening. Haki. It felt like something else entirely, something alien. His hands, usually rock steady, trembled as he pulled a small, black Den Mushi from his coat. This was a direct, emergency line, to be used only in the event of a world-altering crisis. This qualified. He dialed the encrypted frequency. After a moment, a cold, emotionless voice answered from the other side. Report. Guernica swallowed, his throat dry. He looked up at the shattered skull of Onigashima, where a new and terrifying power now sat on a throne of ruin. Lord Gorosei, he whispered, his voice strained. Onigashima has fallen. The Emperor, Kaido, is dead. There was a pause on the other end, a silence that felt heavier than any mountain. By whose hand? The voice asked, sharp and demanding. Guernica took a shaky breath. The victor is an unknown. A man. His name. Uzumaki Naruto. He paused, trying to find the words, the right classification for what he had witnessed. He failed. The concepts didn't exist. So he gave them the only word that fit. His power, it's godlike. Chapter 2, A Crown of Horns. The smell was the first thing to cut through the fog of exhaustion. A thick, cloying miasma of stale booze, spilled food, and old blood, baked into the very stones of the fortress. Naruto's eyes cracked open. He wasn't on the cool, broken archway where he'd collapsed. He was inside, in a cavernous chamber lit by flickering torches that threw dancing, monstrous shadows against the walls. A massive throne, carved from dark, polished stone and draped in furs, loomed behind him. Kaido's throne room. He wasn't in the throne. He was on the steps leading up to it, propped against the base, his torn jacket feeling stiff and foreign. The Kurama-infused chakra had healed his surface wounds, but a deep, resonant ache had settled into his bones. He felt like he'd gone 12 rounds with the 4th raikage and then run a marathon. The chamber wasn't empty. It was unnervingly busy. Dozens of the pirates he had fought against just hours ago were moving with a quiet, nervous purpose. They hauled away broken tables, scrubbed at dark stains on the floor, and restocked massive barrels of ale. They moved around him in a wide, respectful arc, their eyes darting toward him before quickly looking away, as if a single glance might incinerate them. They were cleaning up. And they were waiting. A quiet footstep approached, deliberate and without the fear the others showed. Yamato appeared at his side, holding out a wooden bowl of steaming rice and a piece of grilled fish. Her face was clean now, and she'd changed into a fresh, sleeveless kimono, but the horn shackle on her wrist was a stark reminder of her life here. "You should eat," she said, her voice soft. "You were out for most of the day." Naruto's stomach rumbled in agreement. He took the bowl, the warmth a small comfort in the chilly hall. "Thanks." He shoveled a mouthful of rice, the simple food tasting like the finest meal he'd ever had. "What's going on? I thought they'd all be gone by now." Yamato gestured with her head toward the bustling pirates. "Gone where?" "For 20 years, this island has been their home. Kaido was their anchor. Now you are." "I'm not," Naruto said flatly, swallowing another mouthful. "I'm not their anything." "You are," she insisted, sitting on the step beside him, her kanabo resting against her shoulder. "You're the one who beat him. For them, that's the only thing that matters. They don't understand treaties or ideals. They understand power. And right now, you're the sun and they're just planets caught in your gravity." She paused, her expression turning serious. "They're waiting for orders. King and Queen have been managing the fallout, but they won't make a major decision without you. They're coming to speak with you soon." Naruto sighed, the sound heavy with a weariness that had nothing to do with his battle. He'd toppled the dictator. He should have been able to walk away. But looking at the hundreds of aimless, dangerous people now looking to him, he realized he had not just defeated a man, he had inherited a broken kingdom and its legion of lost soldiers. He'd cut the head off the dragon, but now he was left holding its massive, twitching body. As if on cue, heavy footsteps echoed from the main entrance of the throne room. King the Conflagration and Queen the Plague entered, their immense frames filling the doorway. The other pirates in the hall immediately stopped what they were doing and bowed their heads, their fear and respect for the two remaining all-stars palpable. King strode forward, his movements precise and silent despite his size. The black leather of his suit creaked softly, and the fire on his back cast a warm, intimidating glow. Queen waddled behind him, his cybernetic arm whirring, a fresh cigar clamped in his teeth. "Lord Naruto," King began, his voice a deep, respectful baritone. He stopped a respectful 10 feet away. "You are awake. Good. The crew requires direction." Naruto finished the last of his fish and set the bowl aside. He didn't get up. He just looked at them, his expression unreadable. "Direction for what?" Queen scoffed, blowing a smoke ring. Mama. "For what?" "For being pirates, of course. We're the beast pirates. We need to remind the world we're still here." King shot Queen a warning glance before turning his masked face back to Naruto. "He is crude, but his point is valid. Kaido's fall will create a power vacuum. Our territories will be seen as vulnerable by the other emperors. Big Mom, Shanks, even that upstart Blackbeard will see this as an opportunity. We must launch a preemptive strike. Reassert our dominance. Remind them why this crew is feared." Queen nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And we need to celebrate our new king. I say we raid Citrus Island. It's a rich little kingdom under Big Mom's protection. We can smash her forces, take their treasure, drink their booze, and have a party that'll shake the Grand Line. It's the perfect way to announce your reign." They were testing him. Not with a fight, they knew the outcome of that, but with a choice. They were laying the crown at his feet, a crown of horns and blood, asking him to put it on. They were asking him to be the new Kaido. Naruto listened patiently, his gaze shifting from the pragmatic king to the hedonistic queen. When they finished, a heavy silence fell over the hall. Every pirate held their breath, waiting for the command from their new leader. Raid. Plunder. Conquer. No, Naruto said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a bomb. Queen's cigar fell from his mouth. What do you mean, no? I mean no, Naruto repeated, his voice gaining an edge of steel. He finally stood up, rolling his shoulders. Even exhausted, his presence seemed to fill the room, the lingering echo of his divine power making the air feel heavy. There will be no more raids. No more pillaging. No more terrorizing innocent people. The shock in the room was electric. It quickly curdled into confusion, then into anger. A low murmur rippled through the assembled pirates. But, that's what we do, someone shouted from the back. We're pirates, another yelled, emboldened. We take what we want. Queen pointed a shaking, sausage-like finger at Naruto. Are you crazy? You want us to just sit here and starve? What about our fun? What about our reputation? Your reputation. Naruto's voice rose, cutting through the growing dissent. Your reputation is that of bullies and thugs. You followed a man who choked the life from this country for his own selfish desires. I didn't fight him, I didn't watch him turn to dust, just to step into his shoes and do the exact same thing. He took a step forward, his blue eyes flashing with a dangerous light. That ends. Now. This was too much for them. Their entire identity, their way of life, was being threatened by the very man whose strength they were sworn to follow. The murmurs became shouts. Several pirates drew their weapons, their faces contorted with outrage. The situation was seconds from becoming a full-blown riot. King put a hand on his sword, not to draw it on Naruto, but to control the crowd. Silence. You dare raise your voice to, he was cut off. Naruto didn't move. He didn't shout. He just let it out. A fraction of it. The golden, life-affirming energy he'd used to save the world was gone, replaced by something far more primal. A wave of raw, oppressive chakra, crimson and hot as blood, pulsed from him. It wasn't hockey. It didn't attack the will. It was pure, predatory pressure. The air thickened, becoming heavy and suffocating, like the atmosphere at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench. The torches flickered wildly, threatening to be snuffed out. Every single pirate in the hall, from the weakest grunt to Queen himself, froze. Their instincts, honed by years of living in a world ruled by monsters, screamed at them. It was the feeling of a mouse standing before a hawk's shadow, of a sheep realizing it was locked in a pen with a hungry wolf. Their bodies locked up, their lungs refused to draw breath, and a cold sweat broke out on their skin. One by one, they were forced to their knees, not by a command, but by the sheer, crushing weight of his presence. Queen's knees buckled, his massive body hitting the floor with a loud thud. Even King, with his Lunarian heritage and iron will, took a step back, his visible eye wide with shock. This wasn't the brilliant, sun-like power from the battle. This was the raw, untamed might of the nine-tailed demon fox, a being of pure chakra and malice that had been a legend in his own world. Naruto had mastered it, but he had never truly erased its terrifying nature. The hall was utterly silent, save for the sound of labored breathing. Naruto let the pressure recede, the air becoming breathable again. He looked over the sea of kneeling, terrified pirates. He had their attention. Now listen to me, he said, his voice calm again, but carrying the authority of a man who could unmake them all with a thought. You talk about strength. So let's talk about it. What's stronger? A pack of wolves that preys on sheep, or a fortress so powerful that no army in the world dares to attack it? He let the question hang in the air. Kaido made you wolves. And a hunter came and put him down. You will always be hunted. You will always be fighting for scraps. That isn't strength. It's a struggle for survival. And it's pathetic. He walked through their ranks, his footsteps the only sound. I'm offering you something more. Something better. This country, Wano, has been freed. But the world government will come for it. The other emperors will test its borders. It needs a shield. It needs a wall. He stopped in front of a particularly large pirate, a man with gorilla-like arms. You're strong. I saw you fighting. Have you ever used that strength to protect something? To build something? The man just stared, dumbfounded. Naruto turned back to the crowd. From now on, the beast pirates are no more. You are the guardians of Wano. This island, Onigashima, will be its first line of defense. We will train. We will become stronger than ever before. Not to take from others, but to build a nation so secure, so powerful, that it becomes a beacon of freedom for this entire sea. The world will not fear you because you are raiders. They will fear you because you are an unbreakable shield. That is true strength. That is a purpose worth fighting for. He let his words sink in. He wasn't just giving them an order, he was giving them a new identity. A new dream. It was his talk no jutsu, reforged for a new, more cynical audience. Power, then purpose. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't fear. It was thought. The pirates looked at each other, a new idea taking root in minds that had only ever known conquest. King was the first to speak, his voice laced with a strange new tone. All. A fortress, against the world. He looked from Naruto to the mainland of Wano, visible through a crack in the wall. A new strategic possibility bloomed in his mind, grander than any raiding plan. A secure base. A loyal population. An unbreakable foothold in the new world. It was brilliant. It was insane. And it was exactly the kind of grand vision a true conqueror, a true king, should have. He slowly straightened up, his masked face turning to Naruto. I see, he said. And in those two words, Naruto knew he had won his first, and most important, convert. Queen pushed himself up, grumbling. Protecting? Boring. Where's the fun? Where's the treasure? There's no treasure in being dead, Queen, King said sharply, his loyalty already transferred. This is a better path. A stronger path. The debate would continue, Naruto knew. He hadn't converted them all with one speech. But he had planted the seed. He had broken their old world and offered them the first brick to build a new one. For now, it was enough. Later, as the moon climbed high over the sea, Naruto found himself on the edge of the floating island, on a shattered balcony overlooking the dark silhouette of Wano. The air was clean and cold, and the sounds of the fortress behind him were muted. Are you sure this will work? Yamato's voice came from behind him. She joined him at the edge, her own gaze fixed on the land she loved. It has to, Naruto said simply. Or this whole fight was for nothing. He leaned against the broken railing. It's what I've always wanted to do. Be a king? She asked, tilting her head. He chuckled, a dry, tired sound. No. The opposite. I had a dream, back home. I wanted to be the leader of my village. The Hokage. Hokage, she repeated the foreign word. Is that like a shogun? Sort of, Naruto mused, a nostalgic sadness touching his features. But it's more than that. The Hokage is the one who stands in front of everyone, who takes all the risks, who protects the village with their life. They don't rule from a throne. They stand on the front line. It's not about being the strongest. It's about being the one everyone can count on. The one who inherits the will of all those who came before to protect their precious people. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the distant lights of the capital. That's what I wanted. To protect my home. Yamato was quiet for a long time, processing his words. The concept was so alien to the world of pirates, which was all about personal freedom and power. But it resonated with something deep inside her. Odin's journal, she said softly. He wrote about his journey with the Pirate King. They saw the whole world. They learned the true history. And he came back because he wanted to open Wano's borders. Not for conquest. He wanted to share Wano with the world, and share the world with Wano. He wanted it to be free. Her fists clenched. For 20 years, I've been a prisoner. My father, he wanted to break my spirit, to make me a weapon. All I've ever dreamed of is the freedom Odin wrote about. To see the vast, white sea. To feel the sun on my face in a land that isn't my prison. Naruto looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the fierce yearning that was so strong it was a physical force. He wanted to be a protector. She wanted to be free. And standing here, on the edge of this new world, he realized those two dreams weren't so different. To protect something, you had to ensure it was free. To be truly free, you had to have a place worth protecting. They were two sides of the same coin. In that quiet moment, under the light of a foreign moon, their connection shifted. It was no longer the desperate alliance of the battlefield or the awe of a follower. It was the quiet, profound recognition of two kindred spirits who had found each other in the wreckage of a world they were both trying to rebuild. Thousands of miles away, in a hallowed, silent chamber at the heart of the world, 5 old men sat on cushioned seats, facing an empty throne. The air in the Pangaea castle room was ancient, still, and heavy with unspoken power. These were the 5 elders, the highest authority of the world government. Kaido is dead, the tall, blonde elder with the long beard stated, his voice a low rumble. Defeated by a single man. Uzumaki Naruto, the bald elder with the katana and glasses said, reading from the CP0 report. The name is not in any of our records. Not a marine, not a revolutionary, not a known pirate. He appeared in Wano weeks ago. An unknown. The report from Guernica is hyperbolic, said the elder with the large, dark mustache. He describes power on a scale that defies our understanding. He calls it godlike. It destroyed an emperor, Saint J. Garcia Saturn, the elder with the staff and the star-shaped mark on his head, said calmly. His voice was the coldest in the room. Hyperbole or not, that makes him a threat on par with an ancient weapon. An unknown variable of this magnitude cannot be allowed to exist. It disrupts the balance of the world. We cannot send an admiral. Not yet, the blonde elder cautioned. Wano is uncharted territory, and we do not know the extent of this man's abilities. A direct confrontation could lead to a disastrous loss for the Marines and incite global panic. Saturn tapped his staff on the pristine floor. The sound was a sharp, definitive crack in the silence. We will not use a hammer where a scalpel is required. An anomalous power has appeared. A false divinity. The world has a natural order, and such beings are a cancer upon it. He looked toward the grand, shadowed doorway. Summon him. An aide, waiting in the hall, bowed low and scurried away. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows and stepped into the light of the chamber. He was a man of average height and build, dressed in a simple, dark green tunic and black trousers. His face was unremarkable, plain, almost forgettable. But his eyes were a pale, chilling viridian green, and they seemed to absorb the light around them, holding no reflection, no emotion. They were the eyes of an abyss. The man knelt, his head bowed. Saturn looked down at the kneeling figure. There was no warmth in his gaze, only the cold appraisal of a master examining his finest weapon. Viridian, Saturn said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room. You have a new designation. An anomaly has manifested in Wano. Its power is an affront to the natural order. Viridian looked up, his pale green eyes meeting Saturn's without a trace of fear or subservience. Only a quiet, terrifying readiness. Your mission, Saturn commanded, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than any shout, is to go to Wano. Observe the anomaly. Analyze its power, its purpose, and its weaknesses. He paused, letting the weight of his final command settle. And if you deem it a threat to our world's balance, erase it. Viridian said nothing. He simply gave a single, sharp nod, his eyes as cold and empty as a starless night. Then, as silently as he had arrived, he rose and melted back into the shadows, leaving the 5 rulers of the world alone in their silent chamber, having just unleashed their ultimate solution for dealing with gods. Chapter 3, The Vulture and the Fox. The morning air on Onigashima was filled with the rhythmic clang of steel and the grunts of exertion. Naruto stood on a wide, cleared plateau on the island's exterior, the rising sun casting a long shadow behind him. In front of him, 50 of the former beast pirates stood in ragged lines, sweat beading on their brows. They were a motley collection of hulking brutes, agile human-animal hybrids, and grim-faced warriors. They were also, to a man, utterly bewildered. Again, Naruto said, his voice calm but firm. Forget your weapons. Forget your Zoan forms. Just feel it. Right here. He tapped his own abdomen. The energy inside you. It has a flow, a current. Find it. He was trying to teach them the most basic of basics, chakra sensing. Not molding, not jutsu, just the simple act of looking inward. To him, it was as natural as breathing. To them, it was like being asked to taste the color blue. This is ridiculous, a large man with boar tusks jutting from his jaw complained, his eyes squeezed shut in concentration. I don't feel anything but my breakfast. Yeah, another chimed in. My strength is in my fists, not in my feelings. Naruto sighed. He knew this would be hard. These were people who understood power as an external force, the strength of their muscles, the transformative ability of a devil fruit, the spiritual pressure of hockey. The idea of an internal, spiritual energy network was completely alien. Your fists are part of you, Naruto countered patiently. Your strength comes from inside. This is just learning where the inside really is. He walked down the line, stopping in front of the boar man. Try again. Close your eyes. Breathe. He placed a single finger on the man's forehead. He didn't inject chakra, he just used his own perfect control to guide the man's awareness, to create a tiny ripple in his dormant energy pool. The pirate's eyes flew open. Whoa! It was like a little spark. In my gut. The others stared, their skepticism wavering. From the sidelines, King the Conflagration watched, his masked face unreadable. He had been skeptical too, but he had also seen Naruto perform miracles that defied all known laws of combat. If this strange meditation could augment his crew's power, even by a fraction, it was worth exploring. He enforced the training, his silent, intimidating presence enough to quell any outright rebellion. Beside him, Queen was less convinced, loudly slurping a bowl of red bean soup and muttering about the pointlessness of navel-gazing. Yamato was there too, though she wasn't participating. She was leaning against a rock, watching Naruto with a small, curious smile. He wasn't acting like a king. He wasn't demanding tribute or issuing proclamations. He was in the dirt with his new, unwilling subjects, acting like a sensei. He was trying to build them, not just command them. It was the strangest, most compelling form of leadership she had ever witnessed. Their strange, new routine was shattered by a piercing cry from the lookout stationed on the island's massive horn. Ship spotted. Approaching fast from the southeast. It's not a marine flag. It's a Jolly Roger. The Kid Pirates. The name sent a jolt through the assembled crew. Eustace, Captain, Kid. One of the so-called, worst generation, a supernova pirate known for his brutality, his volatile temper, and his immense bounty. He was a vulture, a scavenger who flocked to the scent of death and chaos, looking to pick the meat from the bones of the fallen. Queen immediately brightened. Mama. Finally, some action. A good fight is just what we need to get rid of this inner peace nonsense. He tossed his soup bowl aside and grinned, his metal arm whirring. King's hand went to the hilt of his katana. Kid is audacious, but not a fool. He wouldn't come here unless he thought we were crippled. His gaze shifted to Naruto. Your orders. Naruto looked out toward the sea. A bizarre, punk rock vessel was cutting through the waves, a ship that looked like it was cobbled together from scrap metal and rage. He could feel the aggressive, spiky intent coming from it, even from this distance. An external threat. He had told his new crew they would be protectors, a shield. The first test had arrived sooner than he expected. Let them come, Naruto said, his voice calm. He turned to the 50 pirates he'd been training. The lesson is over. Go back to the main fortress. Arm yourselves. But do not engage unless I give the word. Understand? They looked at each other, then at him, a flicker of something other than fear in their eyes. It was the beginning of trust. They nodded, scrambling to obey. What about us? Yamato asked, stepping forward, her hand already gripping her kanabo, Takuru. You and I, Naruto said, giving her a small, confident smile, are the welcoming committee. The Victoria Punk docked at the base of Onigashima with a screech of tortured metal. Eustace Kid stomped down the gangplank, a mangy fur coat draped over his bare, scarred chest. His red hair was like a mane of fire, and his lips were pulled back in a permanent sneer. His metallic left arm hummed with latent power. Flanking him was his first mate, the silent, masked enigma known only as Killer, his scythe-like blade spinning idly in his hands. So this is the place, Kid snarled, his gaze sweeping over the ruined entrance to the Skull Dome. Smells like a rotten carcass. Fitting. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as he saw two figures standing on a ledge above, waiting for him. One was the horned woman he recognized as Kaido's rebellious offspring. The other was the man whose name was now being whispered in terrified tones across the new world. You must be Naruto Uzumaki, Kid called out, his voice dripping with contempt. I heard you got lucky and took down the big lizard. Don't get a big head. It just means his territory and his poneglyph are up for grabs. And I'm here to claim them. Naruto and Yamato leaped down, landing softly on the ground before him. Naruto didn't look intimidated. He just looked tired. This territory isn't up for grabs, Naruto said plainly. It's under my protection. Kid let out a harsh, barking laugh. Protection? Is that what the kids are calling it these days? Every bastard with a bit of power calls himself a protector or a liberator. It's all just a prettier word for ruler. He pointed his metal arm at Naruto. I'm more honest. I want it all. The fame, the treasure, the title. I'm going to be king of the pirates. And Wano is my next stepping stone. He didn't wait for a response. Repel. The metal from his own ship twisted and groaned. Plates were ripped from the hull, cannons tore free from their mountings, and a wave of jagged, rusted scrap metal shot toward Naruto like a tidal wave of shrapnel. Naruto stood his ground, a flicker of golden energy briefly coating his hand. He swiped his arm horizontally, and a wave of pure, condensed wind, a gale palm, erupted from his motion. It wasn't a devastating attack, but it was precise. The wall of wind met the cloud of metal, not scattering it, but neatly deflecting it. The entire mass of scrap flew harmlessly into the sea with a colossal splash. Kid's eyes widened slightly. That wasn't hockey. My turn, Yamato said with a grin, her fighting spirit ignited. She charged, not at Kid, but at Killer, who was already moving to flank Naruto. You can have the big one. Divine swiftness, white serpent, she roared. Her kanabo became a white blur as she swung it, the air crackling with the invisible force of her haki. Killer met her strike with his spinning blades, and the two first mates were locked in a furious, high-speed duel, their battle moving away from the main confrontation. Kid sneered. Fine. I'll deal with you myself. He thrust his hands out. Punk rotten, punk vice. The mountains of scrap metal all around Onigashima, the debris from the recent battle, answered his call. Broken swords, shattered armor, chunks of the fortress itself, all of it flew into the air, drawn by his magnetic power. The metal swirled and compacted, forming a colossal, monstrous arm, 100 feet long, its fingers like twisted girders. It loomed over Naruto, blotting out the sun. "Now, bow down!" Kid roared, swinging the massive construct down to crush Naruto into the ground. Naruto watched it descend. It was big, powerful, impressive. It was also slow. He vanished. The metal arm slammed into the ground, shattering the stone and sending a shockwave rippling outwards. But Naruto was already gone. He reappeared perched on the shoulder of the construct, looking down at the shocked Eustace Kid. "Big and loud," Naruto commented, shaking his head. "You really like to make a scene, don't you? Get off me!" Kid bellowed in fury. He willed the metal of the arm to lash out, tendrils of scrap reaching to impale Naruto. But Naruto was already moving, running down the length of the arm with impossible speed, effortlessly dodging the grasping metal claws. He was playing with him. The humiliation sent a surge of rage through Kid. "You're fast, I'll give you that. But you can't dodge forever. Punk Gibson." He clenched his fist, and the entire metal arm detached, launching itself like a rocket at Naruto. At the same time, Yamato, having just overpowered Killer with a blast of icy energy from her club, saw the attack. It was massive, indiscriminate, and moving far too fast. Naruto was its target, but its sheer size would engulf the entire area. She didn't hesitate. It was pure instinct. She moved, putting herself between Naruto and the incoming projectile. Ice mirror. A thick, multi-layered wall of shimmering ice erupted from the ground, a desperate, last-ditch defense. The metal fist slammed into it a second later. The sound was like a mountain breaking. The ice wall held for a single, critical moment, deflecting the worst of the force, before shattering into a million pieces. Yamato was thrown back like a ragdoll, a spray of her own blood mixing with the glittering ice shards as several pieces of jagged shrapnel tore through her shoulder and side. Naruto, who had been about to simply phase through the attack with his own abilities, stopped dead. The world seemed to fall away. The sounds of battle, Kid's furious shouts, the distant clang of steel, it all faded into a dull roar. All he could see was Yamato hitting the ground, the red blossoming on her white kimono. A switch flipped in his mind. The air around him grew cold. The faint, warm glow of his latent chakra vanished, replaced by a pressure that felt like the crushing void of space. His blue eyes, usually so full of life, became flat, emotionless chips of ice. The playful, tired demeanor was gone, stripped away to reveal the apex predator beneath. Kid felt it first. A sudden, primal fear. That had nothing to do with the battle. It was the feeling of having poked a sleeping dragon and woken it up. Before Kid could even register the change, Naruto moved. He wasn't a blur. He was just, gone from where he stood and suddenly in front of the massive, flying metal fist. He didn't meet it with a grand attack. He simply held up a hand. In his palm, a tiny, high-density Rasengan spun, no bigger than a marble, a perfect sphere of chaotic energy. He pressed it against the giant fist. Phut. It was a small, unimpressive sound. But a web of blue cracks instantly spread across the surface of the metal construct. A chain reaction of pure, rotational force tore through it from the inside out. The colossal arm didn't explode, it disintegrated, crumbling into a cloud of useless, metallic dust that rained down into the sea. Kid stared, his mouth agape. His ultimate attack, unmade by a touch. He didn't have time to process it. Naruto was in front of him. There was no sound, no rush of wind. One moment he was 50 feet away, the next he was invading Kid's personal space, his cold eyes boring into him. Kid reacted on instinct, swinging his biological arm, coated in armament hockey, a punch that could dent a mountain. Naruto didn't even look at it. He caught the punch in his open palm, his fingers wrapping around Kid's fist. There was a sickening crunch of bone. Kid screamed, not in rage, but in pure, unadulterated pain. Naruto had effortlessly shattered the bones in his hand through his haki as if it were glass. He twisted Kid's arm behind his back, forcing the larger man to his knees. The whole sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. Killer, still recovering from Yamato's blast, could only watch in frozen horror. Naruto leaned in, his voice a low, dangerous whisper right next to Kid's ear. "You hurt her." The pressure radiating from him was so intense Kid felt like his ribs were going to crack. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution being stayed. But then, Naruto looked over at Yamato, who was pushing herself up, wincing, one hand pressed to her bleeding side. He saw her defiant, pained expression, and the cold rage in his own eyes faltered, replaced by a wave of sharp, painful concern. The killing intent receded, though the iron grip on Kid's arm remained. He shoved Kid away, sending him stumbling forward. Kid cradled his broken hand, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and disbelief. He had faced emperors, admirals, monsters of all kinds. He had never, ever been so completely and utterly dismantled. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a lesson in just how vast the gap was between their levels of power. Naruto walked over to Yamato, his movements stiff. He knelt beside her, his eyes scanning her injuries. "Are you okay? Why did you do that? You should have just let me handle it." Yamato started, then winced as a sharp pain shot through her side. "I didn't think. I just saw it coming for you and I moved." She looked up at him, at the raw, undisguised fear for her safety etched on his face. It was a look no one had ever given her. Not her father, not the samurai. It was a look of profound, personal terror. And it made her heart do a strange, unfamiliar flip. Naruto looked back at Kid, who was being helped to his feet by Killer. The fight was over. The lesson had been taught. He could end him right here. Crush him. Make an example of him. It's what Kaido would have done. Instead, he took a deep breath, pushing down the last embers of his rage. He asked the question, his voice clear and ringing in the sudden silence. "Why do you want to be king?" Kid looked up, confused by the sudden shift. What kind of stupid question is that? To have it all. To be the freest man on the seas. Is that what freedom is to you? Naruto challenged, his voice losing its edge, replaced by a genuine curiosity. Taking what you want. Ruling over others. Does your freedom require their submission? He shook his head. I've seen kings like that. My crown, as you call it, was given to me because I fought to give people their freedom back, not to take it away. He gestured around at the broken landscape of Wano. So I'll ask you again. When you're the king of the pirates, what will that mean for everyone else? Will you rule them, or will you protect them? The question hung in the air, more powerful than any punch he could have thrown. It struck at the very core of Kid's ambition, an ambition he had never once stopped to truly analyze. He built his entire life around the goal of becoming king, but he'd never defined what that meant beyond acquiring power and influence. To rule, or to protect. Kid stared at Naruto, then at his own broken hand, then at the vast sea. He had no answer. For the first time in a long time, Eustace Kid was silent. Without another word, he turned and limped back toward his ship, Killer following close behind. His crew, who had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence, scrambled to make way for him. They hauled up the gangplank and set sail, leaving as quickly as they had arrived. Kid didn't look back, but Naruto knew the question would follow him out onto the open water. He hadn't just defeated a rival. He had planted a doubt, which was infinitely more potent. As the Victoria Punk vanished over the horizon, Naruto turned his full attention back to Yamato. He gently took her arm. Come on. Let's get you patched up. He led her to a quiet, secluded room inside the fortress, one that had survived the battle relatively intact. He had her sit on a large cushion, the light from a high window illuminating the dust motes in the air. Her wounds were nasty, deep gashes from the shrapnel. She tried to wave him off. I'm fine. I have a Zoan's durability. This will heal in a day or two. Don't be stubborn, he said, his voice soft but firm. He knelt in front of her and placed his palm over the worst of the wounds on her side. A gentle, warm green chakra emanated from his hand. It wasn't the brilliant gold of his battle cloak or the terrifying red of his rage. It was the calm, life-giving energy of a healer. Yamato gasped softly as the warmth spread through her, a soothing balm that seemed to melt away the pain. She watched, mesmerized, as the skin slowly, miraculously began to knit itself back together under his hand. How are you doing that? She whispered, her eyes fixed on the green glow. It's just, something I can do, he said, concentrating. As he worked, his knuckles brushed against her skin. It was a simple, accidental touch, but in the quiet intimacy of the room, it felt like a bolt of lightning. The air grew thick, charged with unspoken feelings. He could feel the warmth of her skin, the slight tremor in her body. She could feel the steady, reassuring strength in his hand. He finally looked up, his work done. Their faces were only inches apart. He saw the surprise and wonder in her turquoise eyes. She saw the lingering fear in his blue ones. When I saw you get hit, he started, his voice barely a whisper, thick with an emotion he couldn't hide. For a second. He couldn't finish. The thought of what could have happened, of losing her, was a sharp, physical pain in his chest. A terror he hadn't felt in a very long time. He hadn't felt it for an ally, or for a comrade in arms. He'd felt it for her. And that realization was more staggering than any battle he had ever fought. Yamato saw the vulnerability, the raw fear in his eyes, and her breath hitched. This giant of a man, this being who could shatter gods and dismantle monsters, was afraid. He was afraid for her. A wave of warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with his healing powers. She reached out, her hand hesitating for a moment before she gently touched his cheek. Her fingers were cool against his skin. The connection was instantaneous, a silent conversation that said more than words ever could. In that moment, he wasn't the king of the beasts and she wasn't Odin's heir. They were just Naruto and Yamato. And something new and fragile and incredibly powerful was beginning to bloom between them. Far below the waves, a vessel moved with impossible silence. It was a world government ship, but it was painted a matte, non-reflective black, and its engines gave off no discernible heat or sound. It was a ghost, a hunter. On its stark, metallic bridge, Viridian stood before a large, holographic display. It replayed the scene he had just witnessed through a long-range telescopic den mushi. He watched the brief, one-sided battle again. And again. He saw it all. The strange wind-based deflection. The boy's impossible speed. The miniature blue sphere that unmade matter. And, most importantly, the instantaneous, terrifying shift in demeanor the moment the woman, Yamato, was injured. A purifier, one of his elite, white-clad soldiers, stood silently at his side. Sir, his combat data is inconsistent with any known power. It does not match any Logia, Paramecia, or Zoan classification. His energy signature is an anomaly. Viridian raised a hand, silencing him. He zoomed the image in, focusing on Naruto's face the moment after Yamato was struck. The cold, empty rage. The shift from a defensive fighter to a lethal executioner. He then replayed the final moments, the question to Kid, the quiet healing, the shared moment of intimacy. The inconsistency is the key, Viridian said, his voice a low, analytical monotone. His power is not the true threat. It is a symptom. The threat is his emotional state. His connections. He turned away from the screen, his pale green eyes staring into the dark waters ahead as they approached Wano's coastline. "This is not a product of this world," he stated, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Its power is tied to an alien system. Brute force will be met with overwhelming, unpredictable retaliation." He clasped his hands behind his back. "Therefore, standard protocols for engaging a high-level target will fail." He paused, his cold, strategic mind formulating the only logical path forward. The target must be broken ideologically before it can be destroyed physically. "We will not attack the fortress. We will attack its foundation." Chapter 4, The Voice of the Past. The sun was hot, the air thick with humidity. On the southern plateau of Onigashima, a scene of profound absurdity was unfolding. A pirate, a man whose body was more akin to a grizzly bear than a human, was standing vertically on the trunk of a towering cedar tree, his face beet red, sweat dripping from his nose. His knuckles were white where he gripped two small, leaf-shaped pieces of paper to his forehead. "Focus, Goro." Naruto called up from the base of the tree. "You're thinking about it too much. Don't think about sticking to the tree. Just be on the tree." "It's easy for you to say," the pirate, Goro, yelled back, his voice strained. "You're not the one who weighs 500 pounds. His feet trembled, and with a yelp, his connection to the bark broke. He plummeted down, crashing into the branches below with a series of loud cracks and a final, ground-shaking thud. A group of other pirates winced. A few snickered into their hands. Naruto sighed, scratching the back of his head. "Okay, who's next?" It had been a week since the confrontation with Eustace Kid, a week since Naruto had laid down his new law. The former beast pirates, now grudgingly and confusingly referring to themselves as the Wano Guardian Force, had fallen into a bizarre new routine. Mornings were for Naruto's nonsense, as Queen had dubbed it. Drills in chakra control, sensing exercises, and the perpetually frustrating art of tree walking. Afternoons were for more conventional training, sparring sessions overseen by King, who had taken to the new doctrine with a chilling fanaticism, viewing it as the ultimate path to strategic supremacy. The results were mixed. Most of the crew, whose entire philosophy was built on brute force, struggled to grasp the delicate, internal nature of chakra. But a few, a surprisingly high number, were starting to get it. They were learning to augment their punches with small, concussive bursts of energy, to stick to surfaces for a few precious seconds, to sense their comrades' presence without looking. They were clumsy, inefficient, and utterly ungraceful, but they were learning. And the ones who learned were becoming stronger, faster, and more versatile in ways they couldn't explain. That progress was a more potent motivator than any speech Naruto could give. Naruto helped the groaning Goro to his feet. "You almost had it. You held on for a full 10 seconds that time. We'll try again tomorrow." Goro grumbled, but there was a sliver of pride in his eyes. He nodded and limped off to join the others. Yamato sat on a nearby boulder, Takuru resting on her lap, watching the entire spectacle. A genuine smile played on her lips. She had watched Naruto patiently work with these men she had only ever known as her father's brutal, drunken enforcers. He didn't mock their failures or rage at their incompetence. He encouraged, he corrected, he demonstrated. He was building them up, piece by piece. The scene was so profoundly different from the Onigashima she had grown up in, a place where weakness was punished with death, that it felt like she was living in a dream. Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of King, his black wings furled neatly behind him. "Lord Naruto," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A delegation has arrived from the flower capital. They've been granted passage. It's the Shogun and the 9 red scabbards." Naruto's posture straightened. He turned to the assembled pirates. "All right, that's enough for today. Go get something to eat. King, have them stand down but remain alert." The pirates dispersed, some grumbling in relief, others already arguing about who had managed to climb the highest. Naruto turned to Yamato, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. This was a meeting he knew was coming, but one he hadn't prepared for. He had saved their country, but he was still occupying their enemy's fortress with their enemy's army. It was a complicated situation, and he knew it. They met the delegation in the cavernous, now spotless throne room. Momonosuke stood at the forefront, clad in the formal pink and purple robes of the shogun of Wano. He looked small and young, but he held his head high, a flickering flame of newfound confidence in his eyes, trying his best to fill the immense role thrust upon him. Behind him stood the scabbards, a living wall of legends. Kinemon, Reizo, Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, each one a powerful warrior, their faces etched with the grief of a 20-year struggle. Lord Naruto Uzumaki, Kinemon said, stepping forward and bowing deeply. The other scabbards followed suit. On behalf of the Kazuki clan and all the people of Wano, we offer you our deepest, most profound gratitude. You have accomplished what we could not. You have liberated our home. Momonosuke bowed as well, his voice still high-pitched but firm. Thank you, Naruto Dano. Wano will forever be in your debt. Naruto waved a hand dismissively, feeling awkward under the weight of their formal praise. I just did what anyone would have done. You don't need to thank me. But we do, Kinemon insisted, straightening up. His expression grew more serious, the gratitude replaced by a heavy sense of duty. And it is in the spirit of that gratitude that we must speak plainly about the future of our nation. He gestured to the stone walls around them, to the lingering aura of oppression that clung to the fortress. Onigashima is a symbol of our suffering. The men who garrison it were our jailers. He looked Naruto directly in the eye, his gaze unwavering. We ask that you dissolve this crew. Send them away from Wano. The beast pirates have no place in the new era. And we ask that you relinquish control of this island, so that it may be dismantled and the shadow of Kaido may be purged from our lands for good. The air in the throne room grew heavy. Yamato, standing at Naruto's side, stiffened. She understood their reasoning, but she had also seen the change Naruto was trying to enact. To cast the crew out now would be to condemn them, and to condemn the progress they had made. This was the dilemma. The moment of truth. Naruto looked from Kinemon's determined face to the young shogun, who was trying so hard to be the leader his people needed. He understood their request. It was just. It was right. From their perspective. But it was also wrong. I can't do that, Naruto said, his voice quiet but absolute. A tense silence fell. The scabbards' hands drifted towards the hilts of their swords. Do you refuse the shogun's request? Kinemon asked, his voice dangerously low. Do you intend to become our new master? No, Naruto said, shaking his head. He took a step forward, his hands open at his sides, a gesture of peace. Listen to me. You're right. This place is a scar on your country. These men were your enemies. But the world outside of Wano didn't vanish when Kaido did. Right now, the world thinks Wano is a prize to be taken. The world government, the other emperors, they see a rich, leaderless nation with an ancient weapon's secrets hidden somewhere inside it. They will come. Not if, but when. He pointed a thumb back towards the entrance. These men aren't the beast pirates anymore. I'm retraining them. I'm giving them a new purpose. Not as conquerors, but as a shield. A shield for Wano. You don't put a shield in the middle of your house. You put it on the outside, facing your enemies. Onigashima is that shield. His logic was sound, his reasoning clear. But it flew in the face of 2 decades of pain. Our samurai are enough to protect Wano, one of the scabbards, Denjiro, countered hotly. Are they enough to stop a marine fleet led by an admiral? Naruto shot back. Are they enough to stop Big Mom's entire armada if she decides she wants Kaido's poneglyph? I defeated Kaido with a power they've never seen before. The world government knows it. They will send something just as powerful to contain or destroy me. That fight will happen here, on this island, away from your cities and your people. If you send this crew away, you're not just disarming your most powerful defense, you're painting a target on the flower capital. The scabbards were silent, caught between their pride and the chilling truth in his words. He wasn't speaking as a conqueror, but as a strategist. A Hokage. Momonosuke looked conflicted, his young mind grappling with the impossible decision. He saw the wisdom in Naruto's plan, but he also felt the immense pressure of his retainer's desires. Seeing the impasse, Kinemon changed tactics. You speak of things beyond Wano, of poneglyphs. Perhaps you do not understand the full weight of what you are protecting. He exchanged a look with Momonosuke, who gave a slow, hesitant nod. Come with us. There is something you must see. The journey to the flower capital was tense. Naruto and Yamato followed the scabbards, descending from the floating island to the lush lands below. They traveled through the recovering capital, where citizens were already working to repair the damage from the festival raid, their faces filled with a fragile, newfound hope. When they saw Momonosuke and the scabbards, they cheered. When they saw Yamato, Kaido's child, there were murmurs of suspicion. When they saw Naruto, the blonde stranger who followed them, there was only confused whispering. He was a ghost, a rumor, the force that had ended their nightmare, but he was not yet their hero. They didn't stop at the shogun's castle. Instead, Kinemon led them to the base of Mount Fuji, to a hidden cave concealed behind a waterfall. The air inside was ancient and cold. They descended a winding stone staircase that seemed to go on for miles, deep into the earth. Finally, they emerged into a colossal cavern. In its center, bathed in the soft glow of phosphorescent moss, stood an immense cube of dark, indestructible stone. It was covered in a script that seemed to vibrate with untold age. The road poneglyph. This is one of the 4 stones that point the way to the final island, laughed Tail, a new voice said. An old man, with a long white beard and the robes of a scholar, stepped out from the shadows. This was Sukenishin, Wano's lore keeper. It is the secret Kaido and Orochi sought to possess. Naruto stepped forward, drawn by an invisible current. As he got closer, he could feel it. It wasn't just old stone. It was saturated with something. A lingering energy. A memory. It was sorrow. A deep, profound, ancient grief that clung to the stone like a shroud. It was the echo of a promise made and a destiny unfulfilled, a weight of history that felt achingly familiar. It reminded him of the stone tablet in the Naka shrine, of the long, sad story of the Sage of 6 Paths and his sons. The stones tell the story of the void century, Sukenishin continued, his voice soft and reverent. Of a great kingdom, of a terrible war, and of a truth the world government has spent 800 years trying to erase. Kazuki Oden was able to read this. He learned the truth. Naruto placed a hand on the poneglyph. The sorrow washed over him, a cold tide of forgotten voices and lost history. He felt the weight of the D initial, the promise of a dawn that had never come, the lingering will of a man named Joy Boy. It wasn't just history, it was a living burden. So this is it, Naruto whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. This is the heart of it all. He finally understood. Protecting Wano wasn't just about protecting a single country. It was about protecting a piece of the world's soul. A key to unlocking a truth so powerful that a global government would kill to keep it buried. His decision was no longer just about strategy. It was about legacy. He turned back to the scabbards, his eyes clear and resolved. I understand. This makes my point even stronger. I will not abandon Onigashima. I will not disband the crew. We will be Wano's first and strongest wall. You have my word. His declaration was absolute. The scabbards could see there was no arguing with him. They had shown him their greatest secret to make him understand his place, and instead, it had solidified his resolve to stay. Momonosuke looked at Naruto, at the sheer, unshakable conviction in his eyes, and made a decision. Very well, Naruto Dano, the young shogun said, his voice gaining a measure of strength. The guardians of Wano will remain on Onigashima. But you are not our ruler. You are our ally. An ally to the Kazuki clan. It was a compromise. A pact. A new and fragile alliance was born in the depths of the earth, in the presence of an ancient secret. That night, the tension of the day gave way to a quiet melancholy. Naruto stood alone on a cliff near the old, ruined Kazuki castle, looking out over the moonlit landscape of Kuri. The weight of the Poneglyph's sorrow still clung to him. He had come to this world by accident, and now he found himself entangled in a struggle that was centuries old. Was this his path now? Was there even a way home? You're troubled. Yamato's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She had found him, as she always seemed to do. She came to stand beside him, the moonlight turning her white hair to silver. It's just a lot, he admitted, his gaze distant. That stone, it felt like it was crying. Like it's been waiting for something for a very long time. Yamato was quiet for a moment. She looked at his face, at the burden he now carried so openly. She had spent her life worshipping a legend, trying to fill the shoes of a giant. But watching Naruto today, arguing with the scabbards, standing before the Poneglyph, accepting this immense responsibility without hesitation, she realized something. I need to show you something, she said, her voice firm with a sudden decision. Something I've never shared with anyone else. Come with me. She led him not to the main castle, but to a small, hidden shrine deep in the woods of Kuri, a place Odin had used for private meditation. It was a simple, unadorned wooden hut, but it felt sacred. Inside, she knelt before a small, concealed compartment in the floor and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. Odin's logbook. This is his journey, she said, her voice soft as she opened it. I've read it 1,000 times. I thought the only way to honor him was to become him. She patted the space next to her. He sat, and in the dim light of a single candle, they began to read. She didn't read it to him, they read it together, their heads close, her finger tracing the bold, confident script. They read of Odin's adventures with Whitebeard, of his laughter and his battles. They read of his journey with Roger, of reaching the final island, of the immense, world-shaking truth they found there. They read of the treasure, which was described not as gold or jewels, but as a tale full of laughter. Naruto listened, absorbed. It was a story of incredible freedom, of boundless adventure, but it was also tinged with the same sadness he'd felt from the Poneglyph. The story of a man who found the answer but ran out of time to implement the solution. Finally, Yamato turned to the last pages, written after Odin's return to Wano. His regret, his plan for the future, his belief in a new generation that would come in 20 years. She stopped, her finger resting on a particular passage. The world is waiting for a certain someone, she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly. When they appear, Wano must be ready to help them. She closed the book and looked at Naruto, her turquoise eyes shining with a new, brilliant clarity. The obsessive, hero-worshipping fire was gone, replaced by a calm, steady light. I've been looking at it all wrong, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I spent my whole life trying to be Odin. I thought that was his will. But it wasn't. She looked down at the book, then back at him. His dream wasn't for someone to copy him. It was for someone to finish what he started. To open Wano's borders and help bring the real dawn to the world. She took a deep breath, her gaze locking with his. The weight of her next words filled the small shrine. I don't want to be Odin anymore, Naruto. I want to be Yamato. And I want to see his dream fulfilled. She reached out, her hand resting on his. Help me do it. Not as a savior. Not as a new Odin. As a partner. The word struck him with more force than any of Kaido's attacks. Partner. She wasn't placing him on a pedestal. She wasn't seeing him as a legend or a prophesied hero. She was seeing him. Naruto Uzumaki. She was asking him to share her dream, a dream that now mirrored his own so perfectly. To protect this place, to free it, to prepare it for a role in the world's future. He looked at her hand on his, then into her earnest, hopeful eyes. In that moment, he felt a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt since he'd left his own world. He wasn't just a stray, a freak accident of spacetime. He had a purpose here. And he had a partner. A slow smile spread across his face, a real smile, one that reached his eyes and washed away the weariness. "Okay," he said softly. "Partner." While a new alliance was being forged in a hidden shrine, another was making its move. The forests of Wano were deep and ancient, a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. But for the figures moving through them, they offered no concealment. They were ghosts, clad in stark white combat gear that should have stood out, but instead seemed to bend the light and shadow around them, rendering them all but invisible. They moved with no sound, their feet leaving no impressions on the mossy ground. Viridian stood on a ridge overlooking the flower capital. Below him, the city was a tapestry of light and life, bustling with its nightly activities. He held a small, sophisticated pair of binoculars, its lenses enhanced with strange technology. He wasn't looking at the city as a whole. He was watching individuals. He watched Momonosuke enter the shogun's castle, flanked by the scabbards. He tracked the patrol routes of the samurai. He noted the locations of the main food storehouses, the armories, the tea-houses where information was traded. "Purifier 4, report," Viridian said into a small comms device in his wrist. "Sir," a clipped, female voice replied. "Supply lines for Onigashima have been mapped. They rely on 3 primary routes from the mainland for fresh food and water. All are vulnerable to disruption. Purifier 7, report. Key figures identified and observed," another voice answered. "The Lunarian, king. The cyborg, queen. The shogun's retainers. And the primary emotional anchor, the anomaly's daughter, Yamato. She is rarely far from the target's side. Her movements are predictable." Viridian lowered his binoculars, his pale green eyes cold and calculating. The information formed a web in his mind, a schematic of his enemy's support system. A system of trust, loyalty, and affection. A system full of weaknesses. He looked up at the skull-shaped island floating ominously in the sky. Attacking it directly would be a fool's errand. It would be like trying to shatter a mountain with a hammer. But a mountain could be brought down. You just had to find the fault lines. You had to erode its base until it collapsed under its own weight. "The observation phase is complete," Viridian stated to his unit, his voice a chilling promise in the quiet woods. "We have found the fault lines. The target's strength is his connection to this land and its people. Therefore, our first objective is simple." He looked back toward the brightly lit capital, a city full of innocent people who had just begun to taste peace. We will turn his new home against him. Chapter 5, The Purifier's Gambit. The day began with a lie. It was a beautiful, clear morning in the flower capital. The air was fresh, and the streets bustled with the energy of a city reborn. Merchants hawked their wares, children chased each other through the alleys, and the sound of laughter, a sound that had been a precious commodity for 2 decades, was now as common as the breeze. For the first time in a generation, the people of Wano felt safe. The lie arrived just after dawn. It came not with a roar, but with a whisper of displaced air. On the rooftop of a popular tea house overlooking the main market, 3 figures materialized from thin air. They were clad in stark white, their faces concealed by emotionless masks. The Purifiers. Without a word, Purifier 4 placed a small, metallic disc on the roof's edge. It hummed for a second, then a localized tremor shook the building. It wasn't a violent quake, just a sharp, precise vibration. The tea house, its foundation weakened by years of neglect, groaned in protest. A large crack snaked up its central support beam. Then, with a sound like a sighing giant, the entire front of the building collapsed, spilling wood, plaster, and tile into the bustling street below. Panic erupted. Screams replaced laughter. People scrambled to get away from the falling debris. A fruit cart was crushed, sending apples and oranges rolling across the cobblestones. No one was seriously injured. The purifier's timing had been meticulously planned to ensure that, but the effect was immediate and devastating. Fear, cold and sharp, had returned to the capital. Before the dust had even settled, the second part of the lie was delivered. From a nearby rooftop, Purifier 7 fired a single, specialized arrow into the wreckage. It trailed a thin plume of black smoke. The arrowhead wasn't sharp, it was a canister. It burst upon impact, releasing not a poison, but a symbol. A thick, billowing cloud of smoke formed in the air, twisting and solidifying into a perfect, horned skull with crossed bones behind it, the Jolly Roger of the Beast Pirates. The crowd stared, their joy turning to horrified disbelief. The symbol of their long nightmare, hovering over the ruins of their newfound peace. The message was unmistakable. The beasts were back. On Onigashima, the alarm was raised within minutes. A frantic den mushy call from the capital, sputtering with panic and accusation, reached King. Naruto was in the middle of a sparring session with Yamato, a fast-paced, exhilarating exchange of blows that was more dance than fight. They were laughing, pushing each other, their movements syncing with an unspoken rhythm that had grown between them. King's arrival cut through the moment like a shard of glass. Lord Naruto. There's been an attack in the capital. King reported, his voice tight with urgency. A building collapsed in the market. Our flag was left at the scene. The people are accusing us of returning to our old ways. Naruto and Yamato exchanged a look of cold dread. The peace had been broken. It wasn't us, Yamato said immediately. Every one of the guardians is on this island. I did the morning roll call myself. I know, Naruto said, his mind already racing. Kid wouldn't do this, it wasn't his style. The other emperors were still watching, waiting. This was something else. Something precise. Something insidious. King, lock down the island. No one leaves. Get Queen to review the surveillance den mushy footage, if he has any. Yamato, with me. He didn't wait for a response. He shot off the side of the island, a golden flicker in the morning sun, heading straight for the capital. Yamato followed a moment later, transforming into her divine wolf form, her powerful legs eating up the distance as she raced across the landscape. When they arrived, the scene was chaos. Samurai were trying to maintain order, but the crowd was verging on a mob. Their fear had quickly curdled into a familiar, deep-seated anger. It was them. The Beast Pirates, a woman shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward Onigashima. We knew they couldn't be trusted. That monster Uzumaki is no different from Kaido, a man shouted. He's just put a leash on the animals for now. Naruto landed softly in the middle of the street, the whispers and accusations washing over him. He ignored them. His attention was on the wreckage. He walked over to the collapsed building, his eyes scanning every detail. The broken beams, the pattern of the collapse, it was too neat. Too clean. This wasn't a random act of violence, he murmured to Yamato, who had landed beside him. This was deliberate. It was designed to cause panic, not casualties. He knelt down, running a hand over the dust. His senses, enhanced by Sage Mode which he could now tap into almost instantly, reached out. He felt the lingering traces of unfamiliar energy signatures. Faint, cold, and utterly disciplined. Not the wild, chaotic energy of the pirates he was training. Clones, he said under his breath. It was the only way. I need eyes everywhere. He brought his hands together in his signature cross seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of explosive puffs of smoke, the street was suddenly filled with 1,000 Narutos. The crowd gasped and stumbled back, their shouts dying in their throats at the impossible sight. "Spread out," the original Naruto commanded, his voice amplified by the 1,000 others speaking in unison. "Search the city. Find anyone who doesn't belong. Help with the cleanup. Reassure the people. Go." The clones scattered, a river of orange and black flooding the city's streets, rooftops, and alleys. Some immediately began lifting heavy beams, their combined strength clearing the wreckage with inhuman speed. Others formed bucket brigades to douse potential fires. Many more simply moved through the crowd, talking to people, calming them down, their presence a bizarre but undeniable show of force dedicated to helping. It was a brilliant response, turning a tool of deception into a massive, citywide aid effort. But Viridian had anticipated it. The initial attack was just the bait. As Naruto's clones spread out, creating a sensory network across the entire capital, a second strike hit. And a third. On the other side of the city, a bridge spanning one of the main canals exploded, the same horned skull insignia blooming in the smoke. Seconds later, a storehouse near the city's edge went up in flames. The attacks were surgical, precise, and spread out, designed to stretch Naruto's attention thin, to force him to divide his forces and his focus. The real target, however, was not a building. Viridian stood cloaked in shadow in a narrow alleyway, his pale green eyes watching the chaos he had orchestrated. He saw the original Naruto directing his clones, saw Yamato moving to coordinate with Kinemon and the other scabbards. He saw his opening. "The anomaly is distracted," Viridian spoke into his comms. "The emotional anchor is isolated. Engage." Yamato was directing a group of samurai near the burning storehouse when she felt it. A sudden, chilling drop in temperature. The noisy chaos around her seemed to fade into a dull hum. A figure stepped out of the swirling smoke, a man in a simple green tunic. He was unremarkable in every way, except for the cold, dead light in his Viridian eyes. She had never seen him before, but every instinct in her body screamed danger. Her hand tightened on her kanabo. "Who are you?" "A solution," Viridian said, his voice a flat monotone. He took a step forward. Yamato didn't wait. She swung her club, a wide, powerful arc coated in the shimmering aura of her conqueror's haki. "Get out of Wano." Viridian didn't dodge. He simply raised a hand. His fingers were wrapped in black, hardened with a level of armament haki so dense it seemed to absorb the light. He met the blow. The impact was not the thunderous crack she expected. It was a dull, sickening thud. A shockwave of force ripped up her arm, making her bones rattle. Her haki-infused club, which had clashed with Kaido's own, had been stopped cold by his open palm. But it was more than that. The moment of impact felt wrong. It felt like her own haki had been negated, smothered by his. "Your power is a corruption of the natural order," Viridian stated, his expression unchanging. He twisted his hand, wrenching the club from her grasp, and delivered a swift, precise palm heel strike to her chest. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was impossibly focused. It felt like being struck by a solid iron spike. The air rushed from Yamato's lungs, and a spiderweb of pain erupted from the point of impact. She stumbled back, gasping, her vision swimming with black spots. His haki, it wasn't just strong. It was different. It felt like it was actively unraveling her own. Across the city, Naruto felt it through his connection to the natural world. A spike of pain and fear, sharp and distinct. Yamato's. His head whipped around, his sage mode senses pinpointing her location instantly. The concern on his face was immediately replaced by a flash of cold, incandescent rage. Yamato. He vanished from his position, leaving a bewildered clone to take his place. He moved faster than he had against Kid, a golden streak that tore through the city streets, the world blurring into a tunnel of color. Back at the storehouse, Viridian advanced on the gasping Yamato. He wasn't moving to kill her. His movements were analytical, testing. He was a scientist dissecting a specimen. Your mythical Zoan grants you enhanced physical abilities and cryokinetic powers. Your haki is potent, but undisciplined, he recited, his voice as cold as a morgue slab. An impressive combination. But ultimately, an anomaly to be corrected. He lunged, his fingers formed into a spear hand, aimed not at her heart, but at her shoulder, a crippling, non-lethal blow. He never reached her. A golden flash intercepted him. Naruto appeared between them, his back to Yamato, one hand catching Viridian's spear hand just an inch from her body. The pressure of his arrival kicked up a storm of dust and embers. Naruto's head was bowed, his blonde hair shadowing his face. But the energy rolling off him was terrifying. It was the same cold, absolute pressure that had frozen the beast pirates, but now it was honed to a razor's edge, focused entirely on the man whose wrist he held in an unbreakable grip. "Get your hands off her," Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He looked up, and Viridian found himself staring into the slitted, crimson eyes of the nine-tailed fox. Viridian's own eyes widened, just a fraction. This was it. The true nature of the anomaly's power. It was raw, primal, and utterly alien. He felt his own haki straining against the crushing force of Naruto's chakra. "Objective complete," Viridian whispered, so low only he could hear. He had what he needed. He had confirmed the trigger. He had measured the response. With a surge of his own unique haki, he created a repulsive force, a shockwave that wasn't physical but spiritual, forcing Naruto's grip to loosen for a nanosecond. It was all the time he needed. He twisted out of the hold and leaped backward, melting into the smoke and shadows of a nearby alley. Naruto started to give chase, but a choked gasp from behind him stopped him. He spun around, the red in his eyes fading back to a panicked blue as he saw Yamato collapse to one knee, clutching her chest. The choice was instantaneous. He was at her side in a heartbeat, his hands hovering over her, a frantic, healing green energy already gathering. "Yamato. Are you okay? Talk to me." "I'm fine," she managed to gasp, the pain in her chest sharp and debilitating. His haki, it felt like poison. Naruto's jaw clenched. He had let the man get away. He had prioritized Yamato. And he knew, with a sinking certainty, that he would make the same choice every single time. And the man who had just vanished knew it too. From his new vantage point on a distant rooftop, Viridian watched them. He saw the fury in Naruto's posture give way to frantic concern. He saw the way the anomaly's entire world seemed to shrink, focusing solely on the injured woman. He brought the comms device to his lips. "All units, withdraw. Phase 1 is complete." He had done more than just attack a city. He had found his enemy's heart, and he had placed a target squarely upon it. The chaos in the capital eventually subsided. Naruto's clones, a 1,000-strong army of goodwill, managed to douse the fires, clear the rubble, and, most importantly, show the people of Wano that they were there to help, not to harm. The initial anger of the crowd was replaced by a confused, wary gratitude. They had seen the beast pirate's flag, but they had also seen the man who supposedly led them working tirelessly to save their city. The lie had been sown, but Naruto's swift, overwhelming response had prevented it from taking deep root. That evening, the mood on Onigashima was grim. In the throne room, Naruto stood before a makeshift map of the capital, with King, Queen, and Yamato. They were ghosts, King reported, his voice low. Queen's surveillance network caught glimpses, flickers of white in the shadows, but never a clear image. They moved without sound, and their energy signatures were masked. "They are professionals. Professionals who knew exactly how to hurt us," Yamato added, wincing as she shifted her weight. Naruto's healing had mended the internal damage, but a deep, phantom ache remained. "They didn't try to kill civilians. They tried to kill our reputation. And they came after you," Naruto finished, his voice tight. He looked at her, and the rage from the battle, now cold and controlled, resurfaced. The enemy hadn't just been testing his crew's loyalty. They had been testing him. They had dangled his most precious person in front of him like bait. And he had taken it. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His greatest strength, his love for his friends, his drive to protect them, had just been identified and targeted as his greatest weakness. He slammed a fist onto the stone table, cracking it. They wanted to isolate me. To turn the people against me so I'd be alone. A sound strategy, King admitted reluctantly. If the people of Wano view you as an enemy, our position here becomes untenable. Naruto stared at the map, at the city he had sworn to protect. He had been playing defense, reacting to their moves. That had to change. He had to take control of the narrative. He had to fight this ideological war on his own terms. He looked up, a new fire in his eyes. A fire that was neither the warm gold of a savior nor the cold red of a demon, but the bright, unyielding orange of a leader who had just found his path. Then we'll show them. We'll show all of them. The people of Wano, the world government, the whole damn world. We'll show them who we are. It was in that moment of fury and clarity that the plan was born. A declaration. A statement to the world that would leave no room for lies or misinterpretation. He would stop being a ghost, a rumor. He would step into the light. He turned to Yamato, the anger on his face softening as he looked at her. He reached out and gently took her hand. "Are you with me?" he asked, his voice low and intense. She looked at their joined hands, then up at his determined face. The fear of the day's battle was still a cold knot in her stomach, but seeing the resolve in his eyes, feeling the strength in his grip, it began to melt away, replaced by a fierce, burning loyalty. She had put herself between him and danger once today out of instinct. She knew now she would do it again, without hesitation. She squeezed his hand, her own resolve hardening into steel. "Together," she said, her voice firm. "Always." The emotional armor that had defined their interactions, the roles of savior and survivor, of leader and advisor, was gone, burned away in the heat of the battle. What remained was something raw, powerful, and undeniable. A battlefield confession sealed not with a kiss, but with a shared promise to face the coming storm as one. High in the celestial realm of Mary Geos, Saint Saturn sat in the silent chamber of the five elders. Before him, a single Den Mushi sat on a polished table, its eyes closed. It suddenly snapped open, a calm, cold voice emanating from it. "Report," Saturn commanded. "The anomaly's emotional center is confirmed," Viridian's voice stated, devoid of inflection. "Its power is directly tied to its connections. To break the god, we must first isolate it from its worshippers. Phase 1 was a success. He knows he's being targeted through them. And the next phase?" Saturn asked. "He will react," Viridian replied. "He will attempt to solidify his position, to make a grand gesture to win the people's hearts and minds. He will expose himself. And when he does, we will escalate." A rare, thin smile touched Saturn's lips. The trap was set. The beast was wounded, angry, and predictable. "Proceed with the final sanction when you deem it appropriate, Viridian. Let this false god feel the judgment of the heavens." The Den Mushi's eyes closed, and silence returned to the hallowed chamber. Chapter 6, The Uzumaki Declaration. The air on Onigashima crackled with a new kind of tension. It wasn't the lazy, chaotic energy of Kaido's reign, nor the nervous confusion of the past few weeks. It was sharp, focused, and expectant. Naruto's decision, made in the grim aftermath of the Purifier's attack, had spread through the fortress like wildfire. He was going to speak to the world. In the cavernous forge deep within the island's heart, Queen, for once, wasn't complaining. His massive form was hunched over a strange contraption on his workbench. It was a standard-issue marine broadcast Den Mushi, salvaged from a ship the beast pirates had sunk years ago. It was a powerful piece of technology, capable of hijacking global frequencies, but it had been damaged, its shell cracked and its intricate wiring frayed. Mama. This junk is ancient. Queen grumbled, his cybernetic monocle zooming in on a tiny circuit. The world government's encryption codecs have been updated a dozen times since this thing was built. Trying to splice into their network with this is like trying to pick a seastone lock with a fishbone. Can you do it? Naruto asked. He stood nearby, watching with Yamato and King. Queen let out a dramatic, wheezing sigh. Can I do it? Can the brilliant scientist Queen the Plague, whose genius is only matched by his stunning physique, bypass the pathetic security of the world's most corrupt organization? Please. He held up a pair of delicate tweezers, a strange glint of pride in his eyes. It's not a question of if, my dear new king. It's a question of when. And the answer is, soon. It will take time to brute force the signal. Give me a few more hours. Naruto nodded. Good. Let me know the moment it's ready. He turned and walked out of the forge, Yamato falling into step beside him. Her expression was a mixture of excitement and concern. Are you sure about this, Naruto? A global broadcast, you'll be painting a target on not just yourself, but all of Wano. The target is already there, Naruto said, his voice grim. Yesterday proved that. Hiding in the shadows just gives them the freedom to write the story. They made us look like villains. I'm not going to let that happen again. We have to get out ahead of it. We have to tell our own story, so loud that the whole world has to listen. They emerged onto a high balcony overlooking the sea. The wind was strong, whipping their hair and clothes. Naruto's gaze was fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts were on the village he'd left behind. When I was a kid, he said, his voice softer now, my master, Jiraiya, told me about a dream he had. A dream of a world where people could truly understand each other. He thought I was the one who could make it happen. He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. I tried. I talked to enemies, I tried to shoulder their hate, sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But I always believed that if people could just talk, really talk, they could find a way forward. He turned to Yamato, a flicker of the old, idealistic Naruto shining in his eyes. This is the same thing. I can't go to every island and talk to every person. But I can send a message. I can tell them who I am, what we're doing here, and what we stand for. It might not work. They might call me a liar or a fool. But I have to try. Yamato listened, her heart aching with a fierce, protective pride. This was the man she was falling for. Not the god of destruction who could erase an emperor, but the stubborn idealist who, even in a world that wasn't his own, refused to give up on the idea of understanding. She reached out and took his hand, her grip firm and reassuring. Then tell them, she said, her voice full of conviction. I'll be right here with you. He squeezed her hand, a silent thank you. They stood there for a long moment, a shared silence that was more intimate than any conversation. His dream and her dream, which had found their common ground in Odin's journal, were now fully intertwined. They were no longer just personal ambitions, they were a shared mission. Hours later, Queen's triumphant roar echoed through the fortress. It's alive. Mama. I am a god of the airwaves. They gathered again in the throne room. In the center of the hall, the broadcast snail sat on a pedestal, its large, metallic shell humming with power. Wires snaked from it to a series of jury-rigged power converters and antennae Queen had cobbled together. I've bypassed their primary encryption, Queen explained, beaming. For the next 10 minutes, I can override every standard military and news coup frequency in the world. Anyone with a broadcast-receptive den mushi will hear you. After that, they'll adapt and shut us down. So make it count. Naruto took a deep breath. He had already gathered the other key players. Momonosuke and the 9 red scabbards stood on one side, their presence a symbol of Wano's official sanction. King stood on the other, representing the newly forged guardian force. Naruto walked to the pedestal and stood before the snail. He looked at Yamato, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. She stood proudly at his side, just slightly behind him, not as a subordinate, but as a partner, her presence a visual declaration of the union between the old power of Wano and the new. "Do it, Queen," Naruto said. Queen flipped a large, dramatic switch. The Den Mushi's eyes snapped open, and a low hum filled the air. Across the world, chaos erupted. On a marine battleship in the New World, Vice Admiral Momonga was receiving a report when the Den Mushi on his desk suddenly went haywire. The officer's voice was replaced by a screech of static, then silence. "What's going on?" "Report." Momonga barked. In the newsrooms of the World Economic Journal, reporters scrambled as every one of their snails fell silent simultaneously, their chattering replaced by the same ominous hum. At Mock Town, pirates crowded around a public broadcast snail, waiting for the latest bounties, only for it to go dead. From the opulent halls of Mary Geos to the dusty bars of the Four Blues, the world's information network was hijacked. Then, a voice cut through the silence. A young man's voice, clear, calm, and filled with an unshakable conviction. "To the people of the world. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. On the Thousand Sunny, sailing through a calm stretch of the New World, the Straw Hat Pirates froze." Nami, who had been yelling at Luffy for trying to eat the Den Mushi, stopped mid-shout. "Did that snail just say, Naruto?" Usopp asked, his eyes wide. "Shoo." Robin hissed, her face a mask of intense concentration as she leaned closer to the snail on the deck. Naruto's voice echoed from the snail, broadcast to millions. "You do not know me. But you know the man I defeated. For 20 years, the nation of Wano has suffered under the tyranny of the Emperor, Kaido. Its rivers were poisoned, its people were starved, and its spirit was crushed. I came to this land and saw its pain. And so, I fought. I fought, and I won. Kaido is gone." A wave of shock rippled across the globe. It was one thing to hear rumors of an emperor's fall. It was another to hear it confirmed by the victor himself, his voice broadcast into every corner of civilization. In his office at Marineford, Fleet Admiral Sakazuki listened, his face thunderously dark. The cigar in his mouth was clenched so tight it was about to snap. "Find him," he growled to a terrified subordinate. "Find the source of this broadcast now." "I know what you are thinking," Naruto's voice continued, calm and steady. "You are thinking that a new tyrant has simply replaced the old one. This is not true. I have not come to conquer. I have not come to rule." In the throne room, Naruto's eyes swept over his allies. "I have made a pact with the rightful shogun of Wano, Kazuki Momonosuke. The beast pirates, the army that oppressed this land, have been dissolved." He paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in. "In their place, a new force has been established. The Uzumaki Alliance. Our purpose is not to raid or to pillage. Our purpose is to protect. To ensure that the tragedy that befell Wano never happens again, not here, not anywhere." On a winter island somewhere in the New World, Shanks sat by a fire with his crew, a bottle of sake in his hand. He listened to the broadcast, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Uzumaki Naruto," he mused, taking a long drink. "So that's your name. He's picking a fight with the whole world, Captain," Ben Beckman noted, lighting a cigarette. "He's drawing a line in the sand," Shanks corrected, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "There's a difference. Therefore, let the world hear my declaration." Naruto's voice rose, filled with an authority that transcended military rank or royal title. It was the authority of pure, unadulterated will. "Wano is now a sovereign nation under my personal protection. It is no longer a land of suffering, but a fortress of freedom. Any nation that seeks to escape the yoke of tyranny, any people who wish to live without fear, will find an ally in us. He leaned closer to the snail, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone, a direct address to his true enemies. And let this be a warning to the world government. Your days of operating in the shadows are over. Your false justice and your corrupt nobles will no longer go unchallenged. Any act of aggression against Wano or its allies will be considered a declaration of war. You will be met with the full force of a nation that toppled an emperor and the man who led them. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken. This is our promise. A final moment of silence. Then, the broadcast cut out, replaced by the frantic static of a system trying to reboot itself. The message was over. But the world would never be the same. In the throne room on Onigashima, a heavy silence fell. Momonosuke stared at Naruto, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Kinemon and the scabbards looked as though they had been struck by lightning. They had allied with a man who had just declared war on the entire global power structure on their behalf. King the Conflagration, however, looked at Naruto with something akin to religious reverence. This was not just a leader, this was a force of history. Naruto let out a long breath, the tension draining from his shoulders. He turned away from the now silent snail and found Yamato's eyes. Her face was a canvas of shock, pride, and overwhelming affection. That, she said, her voice barely a whisper, was quite a speech. He gave her a tired, lopsided grin. Think they got the message? She closed the distance between them in 2 steps. The world, the politics, the impending war, it all faded away. There was only the man in front of her, the one who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders but still had the courage to dream of a better one. She reached up, her hands cupping his face, and pulled him down to her. The kiss was not born of passion or romance in the traditional sense. It was a seal. A confirmation. It was the taste of shared dreams, of a battlefield alliance forged into something deeper, of 2 lonely souls finding their anchor in the eye of a hurricane they had summoned together. It was fierce and desperate and full of unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, they rested their foreheads against each other, breathing the same air. Together, he whispered, the promise from the day before now a sacred vow. Always, she answered, her voice thick with emotion. They had drawn their line in the sand. Now, they would wait for the tide to come in. In the dark, silent waters off the coast of Wano, Viridian stood on the bridge of his ship, the echo of Naruto's voice still hanging in the air. The broadcast had been piped through his vessel's comms. One of his purifiers turned to him, her posture rigid. Sir, his declaration, he has directly challenged the 5 elders. He's made himself a global enemy. Viridian's face was a mask of cold composure, but a flicker of something new, something akin to satisfaction, glimmered in his pale green eyes. His gambit had worked better than he could have ever imagined. He had prodded the beast, and instead of lashing out blindly, it had climbed onto the highest mountain and roared at the heavens, announcing its location to every hunter in the world. His arrogance is his weakness, Viridian stated, his voice a low hum. He believes he can win a war of ideology. He has just made himself a martyr. He turned to his communications officer. The target has revealed his intent and solidified his position. He has made himself a symbol. The time for observation is over. The conditions are met. A grim understanding passed through the assembled purifiers. They knew what was coming next. Send the signal to Vice Admiral Dahl's fleet, Viridian commanded. And send the final authorization code to Vegapunk's laboratory on Egghead. The final sanction is approved. His gaze turned toward the distant, floating island of Onigashima, a place that had just declared itself a fortress of freedom. Let the heavens pass their judgment, he whispered to the empty sea. Unleash the Seraphim. Chapter 7, Shadow of the Seraphim. The aftermath of the declaration was a week of profound, unnerving silence. The world, it seemed, was holding its breath. News coups, once they had recovered, chattered with nothing else. Naruto Uzumaki's face, a grainy screenshot from a long-range marine telescope, was plastered on the front page of every newspaper, his impromptu bounty skyrocketing to a figure that rivaled the other emperors. He was no longer an unknown variable, he was a king, a revolutionary, a threat designated in the starkest possible terms by the world government. On Onigashima, the atmosphere was electric. The Uzumaki Alliance, now formally named, trained with a new, desperate fervor. The former beast pirates, who had once fought for plunder and glory, were now fighting for their home, their purpose forged in the fire of Naruto's words. They still grumbled, they still complained, but when Naruto taught his nonsense, they listened with rapt attention. The ability to run up a wall or land a chakra-infused blow was no longer a party trick, it was a tool for survival in the war their new leader had invited to their doorstep. Naruto and Yamato were inseparable. They moved as one, overseeing the training, strategizing with King, and coordinating with Momonosuke's samurai on the mainland. The unspoken tension between them had blossomed into a quiet, confident partnership. A shared glance across a training yard, a hand brushing against another while pointing at a map, a quiet moment at dawn watching the sun rise over Wano, these small gestures built a bond stronger than any fortress wall. Their connection was no longer a fragile secret but a tangible force that seemed to inspire those around them. The peace, however, was a lie. A storm was gathering just over the horizon. It broke on the 8th day. The sky over Wano was a pristine, cloudless blue. Then, a speck appeared in the east. It grew larger with impossible speed, not flying like a bird or a ship, but descending like a falling star. It left no smoke trail, made no sound, but its presence felt like a tear in the fabric of the sky. A lookout on Onegashima's horn screamed into his den mushi, his voice cracking with disbelief and terror. Something's coming. It's not a ship. It's a child. On the main plateau, Naruto and Yamato looked up. Naruto's sage mode senses flared, and a knot of ice formed in his stomach. He could feel it. The thing was shaped like a child, yes, but its energy signature was a horrifying amalgamation. It had the immense, dormant power of a dragon, the burning, solar flare intensity of a unique race he'd only glimpsed in King, and the cold, artificial hum of technology. There was no life in it. No emotion. No soul. It was a weapon wearing a human face. The figure landed in the Ringo region, a land of rolling hills and eternal winter. The impact wasn't an explosion, it was a silent, concussive boom that flattened every tree in a 500-meter radius and kicked up a mushroom cloud of snow. Naruto didn't hesitate. King. Full defensive alert. Nobody follows me unless I call for them, he commanded, his voice sharp with an urgency that silenced all argument. Naruto, wait. Yamato cried, grabbing his arm. No, he said, his eyes hard as flint. This is different. It's what they sent for me. I need to face it alone first. He gave her a quick, hard look, a silent plea for her to trust him. Before she could protest further, he was gone, a golden streak crossing the sky. He arrived at the crater moments later, landing softly on the edge. The snow was melted into a circle of blackened, glassy earth. In the center stood the child. It was a boy, large for his age, with the dark skin, white hair, and black wings of a Lunarian. He wore simple, numbered overalls. His face was a placid, emotionless mask. And curling from his scalp were two familiar, azure-blue horns. The boy's head tilted, his crimson eyes locking onto Naruto. A robotic, synthesized voice emanated from him, devoid of all inflection. Target, Uzumaki Naruto. Designation, Anomaly. Order, Eradicate. Naruto's blood ran cold. He recognized the horns, the shape of the face. It was a child's version of Kaido. The boy's mouth opened, and a thin, pencil-like beam of pure, golden light shot out. It moved with the speed of light itself. Naruto's danger senses, honed by a lifetime of war, screamed. He threw himself to the side, the beam searing the air where his head had been a microsecond before. It struck a distant mountain, and the entire peak vaporized in a silent, brilliant flash. Kizaru's light. Vegapunk's technology. Kaido's DNA. King's durability. It was a seraphim. A perfected, monstrous fusion of the world's most terrifying powers, designed for one purpose, to kill gods. So this is your answer, Naruto whispered, his body already glowing as the golden chakra cloak enveloped him. He couldn't afford to hold back. You build a monster in a child's body. The seraphim, designated S-Dragon, showed no reaction. It simply opened its mouth again. Naruto wouldn't be caught off guard twice. He formed a Rasengan and shot forward, aiming to slam it into the creature's chest before it could fire. He was fast. But the seraphim was faster. Its eyes tracked his movement perfectly. Instead of firing the laser, it moved. It blurred, appearing directly in Naruto's path, its small fist cocked back. A flicker of black-red lightning, Conqueror's Haki, coated its knuckles. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. It could even replicate Haki. The punch connected with his chest. It wasn't the brute force of Kaido's club, it was a blow of impossible density and focus. The golden cloak shattered at the point of impact, and Naruto was sent flying backward, tumbling through the air for nearly a mile before he managed to right himself, a burning pain radiating through his ribs. He looked down. There was a visible crack in his chakra avatar. This thing wasn't just strong. It was a perfect counter to him. It had Kaido's strength and Haki to match his physical power, Lunarian durability to weather his attacks, and Kizaru's lasers that were too fast for even his sage-enhanced senses to perfectly predict. S-Dragon didn't give him a moment to recover. It appeared above him, its leg raised for an axe kick. Thunder Bagua, the synthesized voice announced. Naruto crossed his arms, reinforcing them with every ounce of chakra he could muster. The kick connected, and he was driven from the sky like a meteor, crashing into the frozen earth with enough force to create a second, larger crater. On Onigashima, the members of the alliance watched the distant flashes of light and the shaking of the very earth with growing terror. Yamato was pacing like a caged animal, her knuckles white where she gripped Takeru. He said to wait for his call. King barked at a group of pirates who were readying their weapons. Our lord knows what he is doing. But even through his mask, his own anxiety was palpable. The fire on his back burned erratically, a sign of his agitation. In the crater, Naruto pushed himself out of the rubble, coughing. His golden cloak was flickering badly. Raw power wasn't working. Head-on attacks were being met and countered perfectly. He was fighting a machine that had been programmed with the techniques of his most powerful adversaries. He needed a new approach. He created a dozen shadow clones. They scattered, attacking S-Dragon from all sides with Rasengans and Taijutsu. The Seraphim became a whirlwind of efficient violence. It dodged, it blocked, it countered, moving with an inhuman grace. It vaporized one clone with a laser, shattered another with a Haki-infused punch, and bisected a third with a kick, its movements a perfect, deadly algorithm. It felt no pain, no exhaustion, no confusion. It's not working, the real Naruto gritted out, watching from a distance. It's a perfect engine of destruction. It doesn't have any openings because it doesn't have a mind. It only has a mission. He needed help. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was the truth. He had told them he would be their shield. But sometimes, a shield needs to be reinforced. He raised two fingers to his ear, channeling his chakra into a focused communication line that King now carried a receiver for. King! Get over here. I need a tactical analysis. This thing has your biology. I need to know how to hurt it. His voice was strained. Yamato, Queen, get the alliance ready. I have a plan. But I need you to create an opening for me. The call was a lightning rod. The tension on Onigashima broke. You heard him. Yamato roared, her voice ringing with authority. Let's go. It's time to show the world what the Uzumaki Alliance can do. A war cry erupted from the assembled pirates and samurai, a unified roar of defiance. They poured onto the fortress's decks, their fear burned away by the chance to finally fight for something. King was the first to arrive at the battlefield, his dark wings carrying him at incredible speeds. He landed beside Naruto, his eyes fixed on the seraphim, which was methodically finishing off the last of the shadow clones. A seraphim, King breathed, a mixture of awe and horror in his voice. Vegapunk's masterpiece. I'd only heard rumors. He looked at the flames burning on S-Dragon's back, identical to his own. Its fire is on. That means its defense mode is active. In this state, its durability is, nigh invulnerable. Nigh invulnerable isn't invulnerable, Naruto shot back. When does it turn off? What's the weakness? Speed, King answered instantly, his tactical mind kicking in. When the flame is extinguished, its defenses are lowered, but its speed increases exponentially. That is the trade-off of the Lunarian race. To damage it, you must strike in the moment the flame is off. But to do that, you must be fast enough to catch it. Just then, the sky darkened as a fleet of makeshift airships, jury-rigged by Queen with propulsion dials and armor plating, arrived overhead. Yamato stood on the prow of the lead ship, her white hair whipping in the wind. Naruto, she yelled down. What's the plan? We need to force it to switch modes. Naruto yelled back, his mind racing, formulating a strategy on the fly. King. You're the only one who can keep up with it in the air. Your job is to analyze its defenses, find the pattern. Queen, he shouted into his comms. I need you to scan it. Find an energy signature, a power source, anything that isn't biological. Mama. On it. Queen's voice crackled back. Yamato. Naruto called, his eyes locking with hers. You and I are the spearhead. When King gives us an opening, we hit it with everything we've got. The rest of the alliance, suppressive fire. Don't try to hurt it, just keep it busy. Distract it. The plan was set. The battle began. It was a symphony of coordinated chaos. Hundreds of cannonballs, infused with the pirates' fledgling chakra, rained down from the airships. They didn't harm S-Dragon, but the constant barrage forced it to move, to react. King engaged it in the sky, a dazzling dogfight between two winged warriors. They were a blur of black and gold, their movements too fast for the naked eye to follow. King wasn't trying to win, he was testing, probing, watching the flicker of the flame on the seraphim's back, learning its rhythm. On the ground, Queen, using a massive telescopic scanner, barked information. It's drawing power from an internal source. A beta model version of a green blood reactor. Highly efficient, but it must have a vent or a regulator. S-Dragon, annoyed by the constant harassment, fired a volley of lasers at the airships. Now! Yamato roared. She leaped from the ship, her body coated in a layer of crystalline ice armor. Namuji Glacier. She slammed her kanabo into the ground, and a massive wave of ice surged upward, intercepting the laser blasts, shattering into a cloud of glittering dust. The attack gave the airships just enough time to swerve out of the way. Naruto. Its flame is off. It's going for speed. King's voice shouted from the sky. Naruto saw it. The fire on S-Dragon's back vanished. In the same instant, the seraphim's form blurred, its speed multiplying tenfold. It shot toward Yamato, intending to eliminate the one who had blocked its attack. But this was the moment they had been waiting for. Yamato. Combo attack. Now. Naruto yelled. He was already moving, a massive Rasengan forming in his hand. Yamato, her body still in the air, didn't hesitate. She poured her own energy into her club, a frigid, blue aura gathering around it. She spun, intercepting Naruto as he shot past her. With perfect, practiced timing, she swung her club, not at the enemy, but at Naruto's Rasengan. Ice Embrace. The moment her ice-infused club touched the sphere of spinning chakra, a miraculous transformation occurred. The Rasengan's chaotic energy was flash-frozen, the blue sphere encased in a layer of jagged, razor-sharp hockey-infused ice. It became a new technique, a perfect fusion of their powers, a spiraling star of wind and ice. Rasengan, Hayaten, they shouted in unison. Naruto, his trajectory altered by her strike, rocketed toward the speeding Seraphim. Dragon's processors calculated the new threat, but for the first time, it was a fraction of a second too slow. It was built to counter known abilities, but this was something new, something that had never existed before. The spinning sphere of ice and wind slammed into the Seraphim's chest. There was no grand explosion. There was the high-pitched shriek of the Rasengan's wind blades grinding against the Seraphim's body, while the supercooled ice, empowered by Yamato's haki, created microfractures in its armor. It was a dual-layered attack, destroying it from the outside in and the inside out. Dragon's emotionless eyes widened. A system error flashed across its internal vision. A large, spiderweb crack appeared on its chest, spreading outwards. The green blood reactor. Inside sputtered, its light flickering. The Seraphim was thrown backward, crashing into the ground with the force of a fallen titan. It lay in the dirt, twitching, smoke pouring from the massive wound in its chest. It was broken. Disabled. A ragged, triumphant cheer erupted from the Alliance. They had done it. They had faced a weapon of the gods, and through teamwork, strategy, and trust, they had won. Naruto landed beside the downed Seraphim, breathing heavily. Yamato landed next to him, a grin of pure, adrenaline-fueled joy on her face. They had fought as one. Their powers, their wills, their hearts, all perfectly synchronized. It was a feeling more exhilarating than any victory. But the battle wasn't over. From a ridge overlooking the battlefield, Viridian watched the scene with cold, analytical detachment. He had watched the entire fight, absorbing every detail, every command, every shred of data. The anomaly's ability to inspire loyalty. His strategic mind. The synergy with the woman. The Seraphim had not been a failure. It had been the perfect anvil, designed to test the hammer's strength and reveal its form. And now, the hammer was exhausted, weakened, and basking in the false glow of victory. The anomaly's energy output is at 47%, Viridian murmured, his eyes fixed on Naruto. The emotional anchor is close. His guard is down. This is the moment. He took a step forward, his form blurring as he began his descent toward the crater. The Seraphim was the anvil. Now, the true hammer was about to fall. Chapter 8, The weight of divinity triumph was a fragile, fleeting thing. The cheer from the Uzumaki Alliance was still echoing across the snowy plains of Ringo when a new presence made itself known. It wasn't a sound or a flash of light. It was a pressure, a sudden, suffocating plunge in the spiritual atmosphere, as if the sky itself had turned to lead. Naruto, still catching his breath beside the smoking husk of the Seraphim, felt it first. His sage senses screamed, not with the klaxon wail of a large-scale threat like S-Dragon, but with the sharp, needle-point sting of a predator right behind him. He spun around, pushing Yamato behind him in a single, fluid motion. Viridian stood there, not 10 feet away. He hadn't made a sound. He had simply arrived. He was dressed in the same plain, green tunic, his posture relaxed, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked like a pilgrim who had wandered onto a battlefield by mistake. But the cold, dead abyss in his pale green eyes told a different story. Impressive, Viridian said, his voice a flat, conversational monotone that was more unnerving than any shout. His gaze flickered from the disabled Seraphim to the combined forces of the Alliance in the sky. You have forged them into a cohesive unit. You have turned a mob into an army. King, who was descending from the sky, froze mid-flight. "It's him," he growled, recognizing the man from Yamato's description. "The one from the capital." He was watching, Naruto realized, his blood running cold. The whole time. The Seraphim, it wasn't the real attack. It was a distraction. It was a scanner. A diagnostic tool, Viridian corrected calmly. It was necessary to measure your limits, your strategies, and the precise nature of your emotional dependencies. He took a single, deliberate step forward. The data is conclusive. Your power is formidable, but your foundation is brittle. You are strong because you have things to protect. Therefore, to defeat you, one must simply threaten them. His gaze shifted to Yamato, who stood defiantly behind Naruto. That single glance was a declaration of intent, more chilling than any weapon. Naruto's exhaustion vanished, burned away by a surge of pure, protective rage. The golden chakra cloak, which had been flickering, roared back to life, brighter and more intense than before. "You will not touch her," he snarled, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Viridian simply smiled. It was the first time Naruto had seen him display any emotion, and it was a terrifying sight. A cold, thin, clinical smile that held no warmth, no humor, only the detached satisfaction of a scientist whose hypothesis had just been proven correct. See? Brittle. And then he attacked. He didn't lunge. He didn't charge. He simply flowed. His movement was an exercise in perfect efficiency. He crossed the distance between them in an instant, his hand, already coated in a shell of haki so black it seemed to drink the light, chopping toward Naruto's neck. Naruto met the strike with his own chakra-enhanced forearm. The impact was bizarre. There was no shockwave, no thunderous crack. There was a dull, wet thud, and a wave of something foul and corrosive washed over Naruto's senses. His chakra cloak hissed and sputtered at the point of contact, not breaking, but dissolving. It felt like his own energy was being nullified, turned against itself. "What is this?" Naruto gasped, stumbling back, the arm he'd used to block feeling numb and cold. "This," Viridian said, pressing his attack with a relentless volley of precise, elegant strikes, "is haki pushed to its theoretical limit. Not a bludgeon to crush your will, but a scalpel to sever your connection to your divinity." Each jab, each kick, each open palm strike was aimed at a key point in Naruto's chakra network. He wasn't just fighting Naruto's body, he was fighting his soul. The members of the alliance watched in horror. They saw Naruto, the man who had effortlessly dismantled Eustace Kid and disintegrated an emperor, being forced onto the back foot. He was blocking, dodging, parrying, but he wasn't counterattacking. He was being systematically broken down. "We have to help him." Yamato roared, surging forward. "No, stay back." Naruto yelled, his voice strained. He narrowly avoided a finger jab aimed at his heart, the haki around Viridian's fingertip so sharp it left a visible distortion in the air. "His power, it's poison to people like us. He'll turn your own energy against you." Viridian seized the opening created by Naruto's shout. He swept a leg out, not at Naruto's feet, but at the ground beneath them. A wave of his unique haki pulsed into the earth, and the ground itself seemed to die. The rock became brittle, crumbling to dust. The patch of permafrost snow it was supporting instantly sublimated into a cloud of vapor. Thrown off balance, Naruto faltered for a critical tenth of a second. Viridian was there, his palm striking Naruto square in the chest, right over his seal. The same spot he had struck Yamato. The same spot S-Dragon had struck Naruto. It was his center. The golden cloak imploded, vanishing completely. Naruto gasped, a sharp, ragged sound, as an unbearable cold spread through his chest. It felt like a hand had reached inside him and was trying to snuff out the sun that was Kurama. He was thrown backward, skidding across the blackened earth, his connection to his partner momentarily severed. Kurama, he thought, panic flaring within him. I'm here, kid, the great fox's voice rumbled in his mind, but it was strained, distant. This guy, his power is like a spiritual cancer. It doesn't destroy my chakra, it curdles it. Makes it unusable. Be careful. Viridian walked calmly toward the fallen Naruto, stepping over the twitching body of the seraphim as if it were a piece of trash. Your very existence is a crime against nature, Uzumaki Naruto, he stated, his voice echoing in the sudden, dreadful quiet. You are an unnatural god. And all unnatural gods, from Joy Boy to Nika to you, bring nothing but chaos and suffering. You disrupt the delicate balance of the world. By erasing you, I am not committing an act of evil. I am restoring order. I am a force for peace. He stood over Naruto, raising his hand for a final, decisive blow. Naruto looked up, his vision swimming. He saw Viridian's cold eyes, heard his twisted justification. Peace through annihilation. Order through purgation. He'd heard it all before. From Nagato. From Obito. From Madara. It was the eternal, cursed song of those who believed they could fix the world by breaking it. And in that moment, something inside him settled. The panic, the confusion, the rage, it all coalesced into a single point of absolute, tranquil clarity. Viridian was wrong. Naruto didn't try to reignite Kurama's chakra. He didn't try to force a connection that was being actively poisoned. He did the one thing Viridian, in all his cold calculation, had never anticipated. He let it go. He closed his eyes, and he reached out. Not inward, to the caged sun in his gut, but outward. To the world itself. To the cold air of Ringo. To the ancient, watching trees. To the snow-capped mountains. To the very life force of the wounded but resilient land of Wano. He sank his spiritual roots into the world, and he drew upon an energy that was older than hockey, older than devil fruits, older than the world government itself. Natural energy. Pure, primal, and untainted. Viridian brought his hand down, a blade of hockey meant to extinguish Naruto's life. But it never landed. Naruto's eyes snapped open. The pupils were no longer slitted and crimson, but barred and yellow, like a toad's. Vibrant orange pigment flared into existence around his eyes, the mark of a perfect sage. A calm, invisible, and overwhelmingly powerful aura of natural energy radiated from him, pushing back against Viridian's oppressive hockey like the tide turning against a rock. He caught Viridian's wrist, his grip like stone. Viridian's eyes widened in genuine shock. The energy he felt wasn't the chaotic, fiery chakra he had been fighting. This was calm, balanced, and immense. It felt like he was trying to punch the ocean. His anti-chakra hockey had no effect on it, because it wasn't personal chakra. It was the world's. You talk about the natural order, Naruto said, his voice eerily calm, resonating with the power of the earth itself. But you don't know the first thing about nature. He stood up, effortlessly forcing Viridian back. He wasn't cloaked in gold anymore. He looked normal. Just a man in a torn jacket. But the power he radiated made the golden avatar look like a child's toy. My friends, my bonds, my love for this place, Naruto continued, taking a step forward, you call that a weakness. You think it's a flaw in my power. You're wrong. It's the source of it. It's what connects me to the world. And it's what's going to beat you. He moved. In sage mode, his senses were absolute. He didn't just see Viridian's movements, he felt the intent behind them, the flow of his energy, the shift in the air he displaced. Viridian's precise, elegant style was perfectly countered by Naruto's prescience. Viridian launched a furious assault, his hockey-infused limbs like black lightning. But Naruto met every strike. He didn't block with force, he deflected, he redirected, he flowed around the attacks like water, his movements economical and devastatingly effective. It was frog kata. With a powerful palm strike infused with natural energy, Naruto struck Viridian's chest. The purifier was sent flying, crashing into the side of a hill with a sickening crunch. His haki, for all its potency, could not defend against an attack that was literally the force of nature itself. Viridian pushed himself out of the rubble, a trickle of blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. His calm was finally broken, replaced by a frustrated fury. Impossible. You should be broken. I've been broken before, Naruto said, appearing in front of him. I just get back up. That's my divinity. He didn't form a Rasengan. He didn't summon a tailed beast bomb. He clapped his hands together. Sage art, amphibian binding. The natural energy in the air and ground coalesced. From the earth, spectral, frog-like tongues of pure energy shot out, wrapping around Viridian's limbs, his torso, his neck. They didn't crush him. They didn't burn him. They simply held him, infusing him with a massive dose of natural energy he couldn't process. It paralyzed him instantly, his own haki short-circuiting as it tried to fight off an energy that was everywhere and everything. He was defeated. Not by a bigger explosion, not by a more powerful punch, but by an ideology made manifest. He had tried to sever Naruto's connections, and in response, Naruto had used his connection to the entire world to subdue him. Naruto walked up to the bound and helpless purifier, his sage mode receding. He looked down at the man who represented the cold, heartless order of the world government. He could end him. He could give him the erasure he so clinically offered to others. Instead, he knelt down, his expression not of anger, but of a profound, weary sadness. You were a tool, Naruto said softly. A weapon made by men who are terrified of change. But you're still a man. You have a choice. You can keep being their scalpel, or you can find a new path. A path where you build instead of break. He left him there, bound and defeated, for the Alliance to collect. The fight was over. Wano was safe. For now. The surviving purifiers had been captured by King and the others. The world government's ultimate assassin had failed. The Uzumaki Alliance had faced its first true test and had not only survived but had triumphed, their bonds forged into unbreakable steel. Days later, the world was still reeling from the news. The details were sketchy, but the outcome was clear. The world government had made a move on Wano, and they had been repulsed. Naruto Uzumaki's declaration had been backed by action. He was no longer just a new emperor, he was a legitimate, unaligned global power, a third pole in a world long dominated by pirates and marines. The final scene found Naruto and Yamato on a cliff overlooking the flower capital. It was the same cliff where they had read Odin's journal, the place where their dreams had officially merged. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Below, the capital was peaceful, the lights of the city beginning to sparkle in the twilight. Naruto had found his place. The ache of his lost home was still there, a dull throb in a distant part of his soul, but it was no longer a gaping wound. It was a scar, a memory. Because here, in this world he had been thrown into, he had built a new home. He had a purpose. He had people to protect. Yamato leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his. The sea is quiet, she said softly. For now, he answered, his gaze on the horizon. They'll be back. The elders, the other emperors, this is just the beginning. I know, she said, her voice completely devoid of fear. She looked up at him, her turquoise eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. But this time, we'll be ready. And we'll face them together. He looked down at her, at the fierce, beautiful woman who had fought for him, trusted him. And stood by his side against the world. He had come here as a lost stranger, a warrior without a war. He was now a king without a throne, a protector of a nation he had adopted as his own. He was the king of beasts, the leader of the Uzumaki Alliance, a global power. But in this moment, on this cliff, he was just Naruto. And he was in love. He smiled, a genuine, happy smile that lit up his entire face. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. Together, he affirmed. The king of beasts and the ogre princess, the fox and the wolf, stood hand in hand, ready to face the dawn of a new era. An era they would build themselves. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.